The settlement called Hardhome crouched beneath a charcoal sky, its warped palisade leaning like a tired old crone over a jagged shore of iron-gray stones. Fish oil torches guttered in the wind, their flames clawing at the darkness but finding little purchase. Inside the walls a crush of wildlings, thousands, ragged and afraid, shifted like cattle before a coming storm. Mothers hushed wailing children, raiders clutched cracked shields that could not stop the dead, and the dogs felt it all first, baring their yellowed teeth at the chill spilling down from the mountains. Sir Jon Snow stood near the gate, the wind tangling his black hair across his eyes. In the breath between heartbeats, he tasted the salt of the shivering sea and the copper of dread. Every childhood tale old and ever whispered about Hardhome, its ghostly wraiths and fiery punishments, had been born again tonight, clothed now in harder flesh. To his left waited Tormund Giantsbane, thick arms folded, white pelt flapping. To his right, Dolorous Ed cursed under what breath he still owned. The boats they had brought north bobbed at anchor just beyond the surf, already crammed with the first wave of women and children bound for the wall. But the masts looked frail against the endless dark, and there were too many souls still ashore. Jon counted the torches, the faces, the shabby tents, and saw only sums that would not please the gods. Then the timber palisade creaked. Not from the dead. The air itself seemed to ripple, dry leaves scattering where no leaves grew this far north. An animal roar poured over the camp, vast and furious, so deep it vibrated in men's sternums. Horses screamed and the wildlings surged back until their heels scraped the cliff's edge. Above them a smear of red and black eclipsed the night. Great wings, each membrane striped like lava stone, beat once, displacing whole furnaces of air. Firelight flared along obsidian scales, and for a moment every face at Hardhome shone in that glow, hope and terror braided into one shining thing. Jon's sword arm dropped as the beast banked, tail carving a wide arc over the water. The dragon, bigger than any living creature Jon had imagined outside of children's tales, was Drogon, though none here could name him. He had left Meereen days earlier, drawn westward by some impulse older than men, older than Valyria, older, perhaps, than the wall itself. Hungers beyond meat and fire guided him now. The pull of cold voids, the scent of roaming death. Across the bay, atop a glacier-scoured ridge, the Night King watched. Ice crystals lacquered the fissures in his pale brow. Sapphire eyes flickered with what might have been curiosity. Around him, thousands of wights stood motionless save for the sea wind plucking at their hair and rags. They had no language, but a silent command pulsed through the dead ranks, cold as the marrow in ancient bones. Hold! Drogon's second scream broke that stillness. He folded his wings once, dove in a devastating slant, and opened jaws lined with fangs long as scythes. Some children cried dragon, others demon, but the sound was drowned by the torrent of wildfire that thundered from his throat. It was not the pale yellow of castle pyres nor the green witch flame of alchemists. It was a living aurora of orange at its core, rimmed in blue so bright it hurt the eye. The first sheet of flame splashed across the ridge. Ice cracked. Snow boiled away in plumes. Whites ignited like parchment, staggering in mute confusion before disintegrating into drifting ash that sparkled, for the span of a heartbeat, like a false winter's snowfall. Jon felt heat on his face, violent and immediate, yet somehow clean. He watched a wall of the dead evaporate. Even Tormund, who bragged he feared nothing born of man or beast, swallowed hard enough to bob the cords in his throat. The silhouettes of burning whites danced behind Jon's eyelids like brands stamped onto the softest part of memory. At the ridge's center, the Night King alone remained unscorched. Frost rippled outward from his feet, cracking molten rock and snuffing stray flames. He lifted one hand, scarred, talon-like fingers splayed, and a lance of cerulean ice appeared within his grasp, 6 cubits long, honed to a rime-bright point. In the air between them, the hush deepened, as though the world drew a long breath before a scream. Drogon climbed, banking for another pass. His wings, half-transparent in the firelight, bore streaks of ash. The Night King drew his arm back and cast the spear with impossible force. It shrieked across the gulf, trailing diamond dust. Jon's stomach pitched. He remembered Viserion falling at the lake, remembered the sick sound of dragon bone shattering. The blue spear curved upward, hungry for heart and furnace both. Drogon twisted in midair. The spear nicked a scale at the joint of his wing and spun harmlessly into the sea. Fury answered. Drogon wheeled down in a stopping dive, impact trembling the ridge. Jared's stone split. The Night King displaced barely a step. One crimson eye glowered across the abyss beneath him, and Drogon loosed a roar so raw it flayed the silence. Fire answered. Torrent, catastrophic, unrelenting. It hammered the Night King in a pillar so bright Hardhome's torches guttered invisible beside it. The ridge glowed cherry, then white. Rock ran molten beneath immortal frost. Ice armor steamed. The Night King raised his arms as though commanding some unseen tide. The cold within him fought, but the conflagration was older than any magic the first men ever whispered of, older than the magic the children bled into the weirwoods. It was dragonfire born in the darkest belly of Valyria, summoned by moonblood and volcano. For a moment impossible spans overlapped. Ice and fire, night and dawn, death and a thing that lived so ferociously it burned the world around it. Then the Night King cracked. Sound cut like granite splitting under a miner's pick. A sharp report, a second, a dozen. Fissures raced across his form, through breastplate wrought of endless winter, through ribs, through skull. Blue eyes widened. Light erupted through the fractures, white hot. The specter that had stalked men's dreams for 8,000 years shattered like a goblet flung from a tower. Pieces of him flew outward, sparkling prisms, each dissolving to steam before it touched snow. On the ridge, every white collapsed at once. Bones hissed, meat sloughed. 1,000 lifeless marionettes robbed suddenly of their strings. The silence afterwards felt perilous. Jon realized he had been holding his breath and exhaled raggedly, as though he too had burned from the inside. Far above, Drogon circled once. Ash vortices whirled in his slipstream. When no further enemy rose to greet him, he turned his head south, towards horizons unknown, and with a single downbeat of wings disappeared into cloud. The long night ended with neither fanfare nor prophecy fulfilled, just an emptiness so vast it frightened even the living. Cold mist threaded the graves of extinguished fires across the ridge while Jon and a small band climbed the ruined slope. Charred rock glowed beneath thin frost like half-hidden coals. Branched splinters of what had once been an army of corpses lay strewn as blackened sticks. No blue eyes shone in their sockets. No white fingers clawed for renewed purchase. Tormund nudged one skull with his boot, sending it rolling until it cracked apart against another rock. "Gone," he muttered, half disbelief, half prayer. "Burned so hot they won't ever come back, God's willing." His throat worked, uncertain whether to laugh or weep. Ghost padded ahead, pale fur scorched at the tips. He sniffed melted ice, ears flattening against a faint rattle under stone. Bones shrinking as fire finished its feast. Jon laid a hand on the direwolf's shoulder. The wind had shifted. It no longer smelled like grave dust but ozone and something metallic, faintly sweet, the world exhaling after holding death too long. Dolorous, Ed pointed seaward. "Lord Commander, we've got tales enough for 10 lifetimes, but we've still got wildlings to load. If the dead are truly done, we best ferry them south afore the next bloody miracle." The black humor in his voice trembled like a wet spark. Jon nodded, yet his gaze lingered on the high ground where once a nightmare had stood. He felt an echo, as though some ancient chord had resolved, leaving the next note hovering, unresolved, fearful of the silence it must fill. Far to the south, in the soft sands east of Meereen, Daenerys Targaryen woke before dawn, heart hammering. Drogon's vantage, the swirl of starlight above frozen seas, faded from her inner eye, but the taste of ash lingered on her tongue. She rose, throat raw, certain her dragon had touched some terrible thing. The air smelled of winter though summer still reigned. A brittle foreboding ran beneath each breath. She clothed herself in white silk and climbed the Great Pyramid's wind-churned steps, staring across a still sleeping city toward the black horizon. Somewhere beyond that curve of earth, Drogon raced homeward, carrying with him the death of death and the birth of something new. At Winterfell, Maester Wolkan squinted at the broken horizon, spyglass trembling. The night sky glowed faintly red to the north, an aurora he had never recorded. In the courtyard, Arya and Sansa sparred with wooden blades, distracted by the strange dawn. Bran wheeled silently beneath the weirwood, eyes glazed. The ravens roosting above him stirred as one. A single grain of future unfurled within the roots of the old gods. Lines diverged, paths once frozen in prophecy thawed. The song of ice and fire had found a new verse, unscripted. It rang now like a distant bell, calling lords and lowborn alike to a dance whose steps no maester had set to parchment and no red priestess had seen in flame. By the time the last wildling boat shoved off Hardhome's shore, the first silver bars of dawn sliced the horizon. Jon leaned against a mast, allowing salt spray to cool the heat still blooming in his cheeks. He watched the ridge retreat, a broken crown of obsidian and slag. A shape, could it be a man? Stood alone at the peak. But when Jon blinked, the shape was gone, as though erased by morning. On deck, Gilly wrapped little Sam in furs, humming a lullaby older than the wall. Tormund dozed sitting upright, beard crusted with brine. The ship rocked beneath stars paling toward memory. Jon closed his eyes, uncertain whether to mourn the war he had been groomed to fight or rejoice that men might never need fight it at all. He did not yet know what challenges thrived after winter's endless herald fell, how the politics of a living realm ignite fiercer passions once the dead are gone. He did not know of the whispers already racing south along the King's Road, that the bastard of Winterfell had slain the Night King, that Valyrian blood rode dragons once more, that prophecy lay in tatters waiting for new hands to weave it to advantage. What Jon Snow knew, as the prow dipped into a fresh wave, was simpler. He had witnessed the impossible and lived. The breath in his lungs belonged to no prophecy and no king. It was his own, and for the first time since he could remember, it tasted like a beginning. The Citadel's ravens carried tidings slower than rumor but faster than doubt. Within a fortnight, scrolls arrived in White Harbor, in Gulltown, in the damp hallways of the Red Keep. Lords unrolled parchments and felt their palms sweat. The dead no longer marched. The wall stood untested. The North might remain North, but the true war was over before most had lifted a sword. Cersei Lannister read the letter twice, then set it aflame over a goblet of Dornish red. Qyburn watched ash spiral. If the threat is ended, she mused, voice flat as hammered gold. Our enemies march south next. Already she envisioned fault lines. Wildling refugees, northern ambitions, Targaryen dragons unyoked from noble purpose. Summon the captains. The game has changed, yet the pieces remain. North of the Neck, on a hill warmed by new spring light, a heart tree listened to the quiet. Where once it had heard the cold song of White Walkers echoing beyond the world of living things, it now heard thunder that was not thunder. Wings of shadow, bearing a rider whose hair shone silver in the sun. Fire would come south, perhaps to burn, perhaps to forge. The tree did not choose between futures. It only listened, and the red sap tears beneath its bark tasted sweeter than before. Still the line of ships crawled toward the wall. Jon clutched the hilt of Longclaw, thinking not of ancient enemies but of the thousands now depending on him. Free folk whose survival would strain the Night's Watch stores, whose presence would offend lords already suspicious of his vows. The unborn wars of bread and pride and mercy lay ahead. Behind him, in the barrow of the ridge, embered snow drifted over the place where a king of night had ended. Beneath that charred crust something fragile stirred, neither living nor dead, a relic of magic unmade. It waited, small as a cinder, for the turning of seasons, for curious hands, for the next heartbeat of a world forever hungry to reshape its legends. And in distant skies, Drogon roared, the sound a clarion unspent. He carried on his scales the scent of frost-made steam, the taste of an enemy older than dynasties, and the knowledge that fire, once unleashed, is never content to sleep. End of Part 1. Snow clouds, high and bulbous, drifted across the pale sky as the ragged flotilla scraped against the icy strand beneath the Shadow Tower. Jon Snow vaulted from the bow of the first skiff and landed ankle-deep in slush, Longclaw chiming in its scabbard. His knees trembled with exhaustion, but duty held him upright. The wooden pier groaned under the stampede of refugees. Mothers with bundles strapped across their chests, raw-boned hunters, the thin-haired elders of forgotten clans. They funneled toward the switchback stair that wound up the sheer rock face, toward the oak gates of the watch. Black brothers hurried to and fro, lanterns bobbing. Spare cloaks and heel bread and stewpots were already stretched past logic. Gaunt faces set about impossible tasks with the grim precision of undertakers. Above all towered the wall itself, crystalline and mute, its surface burnished amber by a dawn none of them had expected to live to see. Jon's boots crunched. He caught the arm of the first steward he passed, slight, lantern-jawed Bowen Marsh. Food stores. 5 weeks if we water the ale and ration oats by half. Marsh's breath fogged, words clipped. Less if the horses eat, less still if the WY. He bit the word before finishing. Jon squeezed the man's shoulder. Quarter rations for brothers, half for the free folk. Post runners for every holdfast south of here. If the realm wants the north to stand, it will feed the wall that guards it. We'll pay in iron mining rights if we must. Bowen nodded once and pivoted into the swarm, voice rising in clipped orders. Behind Jon the seaside, each tide dragging spent embers from Hardhome's ridge into the maw of the shivering sea. Ghost stalked at his heel, hackles lifting whenever a wildling drew too near, but the direwolf's red eyes were softer tonight, as though he too tasted a change in the air. By mid-morning, the courtyard behind the wall resembled a market struck by plague. Bodies everywhere, hope nowhere. Jon helped a girl with frostbitten toes up the rampart stairs, directed a clutch of spearwives toward the cellars for bedrolls, lifted 2 dead weight barrels of pickled cod on his own back when no one else had strength left. Each step pulled him deeper into exhaustion, until the edges of the world blurred and rang. At last, in the warming room beneath the Shadow Tower's library, he found a sliver of privacy. The walls were rough stone, lit by a single brazier that hissed when snowmelt dripped onto its coals. Samwell Tarly waited there, quill poised over parchment. Fatigue pooled dark under his eyes. "You saw it all," Sam murmured as Jon entered. "I can hardly believe what the ravens say." Jon shed his damp cloak, steam rising from his shoulders. "You believe me? I'd believe you if you told me the moon split in 2 and rained milk." Sam's half-smile faltered beneath a study of Jon's face. "But," I read, "Dragonfire is pure heat, hotter than any forge. The histories claim it can melt stone. The others were creatures of cold and fear. Fire was always their bane. Only, no one ever imagined a dragon in the far north." Jon sank onto a bench, muscles quivering. He stared at the parchment map Sam had unfurled. The wall, the frostfangs, then a smudge of ink marking Hardhome. Beyond it, nothing but white. It ended, yet I don't feel free. If anything, I feel... He searched for language that would not betray him. Displaced. Sam dipped his quill. A war that old made the world what it is. When it vanishes, everything built upon its shadow slips. He wrote while speaking careful lines. Provisions, head counts, maesters to send, ravens to fly. His candle trembled. The citadel will challenge every word. Cersei will call Drogon an illusion crafted to justify wildling incursion. Jon rubbed his eyes. Visions swam. Drogon's silhouette eclipsing stars, molten ice, the Night King's shatter. Daenerys Targaryen controls the dragon, he said. So the rumors claim. Sam tugged at a curl of hair. And if she flies him south with another 2 to flank? She freed the world of the dead. Jon's voice thinned to a whisper. But lords measure salvation in coin and crowns. Across the continent, Daenerys Stormborn stood at the bow of a Myrish cog carving up the summer sea. The voyage from Meereen had taken weeks, yet she could not rest. Sea spray salted her lips as wind whipped her silver-gold hair loose from its braid. Missandei stood near, a roll of parchment pressed to her breast. Tyrion Lannister leaned on the rail, wine dark in his goblet. "Another raven from Yora," Missandei said softly. "Queen, the wall stands. The Night King is gone. Wildlings flood south. The free cities murmur you will march." Daenerys closed her eyes, nostrils flaring at the mingled scents of tar, seaweed, and oiled rigging. In her dreams she had felt Drogon's fire batter ice. She had woken choking on soot. True or not, rumor alone might shift kingdoms. She opened her eyes to Tyrion, whose gaze was more calculating than the wine suggested. "If winter's great terror is slain and Westeros no longer requires saving," he mused, "your liberation becomes conquest again. The small folk might cheer you for toppling Cersei, but the lords prefer devils they know. I am not here to beg their favor." Daenerys gripped the rail hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "I will break the wheel." Tyrion's mouth quirked. "The wheel is easier to shatter when its spokes are brittle. This news strengthens them by removing all other cracks." He tipped his goblet back. "We must find fresh leverage." "The people are leverage," she said, voice hard. "They suffer under Cersei. I will show them freedom." Tyrion studied her face, the wine's surface trembling with the ship's roll. "Let us hope Drogon's triumph buys more awe than dread." Daenerys turned her face north. Somewhere ahead stretched the narrow sea, and beyond it Dragonstone. Smoke memories rolled in her chest. The Night King's bones exploding to vapor, Drogon keening triumph into the void. She felt the silhouette of destiny shifting, like a banner hauled down in the dark. At Winterfell, crows circled the sky in restless gyres. Sansa Stark stood atop the battlements, smoke of her breath mixing with theirs. She read the parchment that had arrived hours earlier. Jon's hand rough but clear. "We live. The dead no longer threaten. Refugees coming. Prepare." She lowered the letter. Light glazed the roof's bronze. The notion that life could return to something resembling grain taxes and wedding packs felt obscene after seasons preparing for annihilation. Arya arrived beside her with silent feet. Her cheeks were flushed from training. Needle swung at her hip. "How many?" "Thousands." Sansa's tone betrayed neither dread nor relief. "They'll need food, shelter, work. Kings in the south squabble over coin, while the north shoulders the cost of survival again." Arya shrugged. "Jon will manage." Sansa watched her sister. Once she had prayed for the simple faith Arya wore now. A sword solves knots, a brother solves kingdoms. But the years had carved the world's subtleties into Sansa's bones. "The Night King is dead," she said. "But dragons live. 3 of them if the tales hold true. One dragon ended 8,000 years of fear. Imagine what 3 could make lords do." Arya's smile was small and sharp. "Lords made us flee Winterfell. Lords killed our father. I don't mind if dragons make them piss themselves." Sansa let herself laugh, but the sound held brittle edges. "You would rather burn the game board than play. I must consider every piece." Arya's gaze drifted southeast. "Pieces burn too." Her tone contained sand and wind and cold all at once. She walked away, snow crunching soft. Sansa remained, the wind plucking her red hair like harp strings. Somewhere beyond snow-capped peaks marched an army of living Northmen. All of them hungry, all of them certain the world owed debt for their terror. She wondered what currency they would accept. The Iron Islands tasted their first spring storm in months the night Drogon crossed above. Euron Greyjoy stood barefoot on the drizzle-slick spar of Silence's mainmast, arms spread wide as wings. Rain sheeted off his bare chest, sluicing down coils of Oathkeeper chain. Lightning lit the beast's underbelly, enormous and glistening as wet obsidian. The dragon shrieked, and thunder answered. Sailors on the deck below screamed prayers to the drowned god or fled for hatchways. Euron's laughter cut the gale. "Find me his rider," he roared into the wind, "or bring me a weapon that will make him land." No answer reached him, only the boom of waves against Hull and the faint whistle of Drogon flying east. as though summoned by a voice none aboard could hear. When dawn came, Silence limped at half-sail toward Old Wyke, crew haunted by the memory of scale and fire above tempest waters. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei Lannister stood before a broad map of Westeros pinned to the small council chamber's wall. Pins of gold and jet marked borders. Scrolls littered the table, reports of Targaryen sails in the summer sea, of northern movements, of Dorne's feint at rebellion. Her fingers drummed a sinister beat upon polished oak. "The people whisper of salvation," Qyburn said, leaning closer, voice silken. "They say the dragons saved them from the dead who would soon overrun the realm." Cersei snorted. "Saved? The wildlings that beast ferried to our wall will flood south like locusts. Food will grow scarce, fever will spread, chaos will bloom. The Dragon Queen will pose as healer, but she will bring plague." She turned. "We will build higher walls here, and send starving refugees this message. King's Landing is closed." Qyburn's thin lips twitched. "If I may, your grace, gates alone will not hold dragons. Which is why we acquire a second Scorpion fleet. Improve the torsion arms. Larger bolts tipped with Shadowbinder obsidian." She traced a finger across a parchment blueprint. "Fire may break ice, but steel breaks flesh." A knock. Ser Gregor Clegane loomed in the doorway, helmet skull-silent. Behind him shuffled a trembling courier holding a raven scroll. Cersei's eyes narrowed. "Well," the courier swallowed. "From Riverrun, your grace. Lord Edmure Tully pledges neutrality, but says his harvest might relieve northern shortages if the crown arranges safe transport." Cersei's smile unfurled slowly. "Dispatch gold cloaks to Riverrun. Confiscate the harvest for fair compensation. That will starve the northerners and remind Riverrun who feeds the realm." She dismissed the courier with a flick. When she turned back to Qyburn, her smile had sharpened. "War is a feast. Only fools share the table." Meanwhile, deep in the crypts beneath Dragonstone, Melisandre of Asshai lit narrow candles before the carved faces of forgotten Targaryen princes. Red shadows danced along old stone. She had felt the cold vanish the moment Drogon's flame erupted half a world away. "A snag in fates we've loosed." She bowed her head over the flames, speaking to the Lord of Light. "Azor Ahai's prophecy bends," she whispered. "If ice is slain by fire, the sword is forged, yet the tempering is not finished. I prayed to witness an anointed hero, not a burnt thread severing the tapestry. Show me truth." The flames revealed shivering images. Drogon winging over moonlit ruin, Jon Snow's brooding face ringed by spectral direwolves, Daenerys descending a stair of bone, half in shadow, a crown of ash swirling above a slab of Valyrian steel. Smoke coiled. She gasped, clutching her chest where a ruby glowed. Suddenly the vision fractured. Embers flared, and within them staggered a pulse of blue frost, pulsing, alive. Not a man, not dead, but a shard. It writhed, searching for host. Melisandre's gasp became a cold exhalation. Some foes burn only to rise anew. Fragments endure. Her fingers found the ruby, unless stamped underfoot before they draw breath. Back at the wall, Jon knelt within the rookery's shadowed recess, tying a parchment to Ragged Raven's leg. The missive bore stark seal and careful words. "Dragon Queen may come. We extend peace if she aids north with grain. We seek counsel at Winterfell. Signed, Jon Snow, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch." Outside, snow resumed in lazy spirals. The first raven took wing, then another. Jon watched black wings vanish into white sky. His breath misted. He thought of Ygritte, of Maester Aemon, of Gren and PYP, souls that would never see this world reforged. The Night King was ash, but the tally of the dead remained carved in bone. He descended the spiral stair to courtyard chaos. More cots, more wounded, more mouths. Free folk children traced direwolves into new snow with sticks, laughter cutting winter hush. Tormund swung hammers into boards, building makeshift shelters. A steward passed Jon a cup of thin ale. He warmed his hands on the pewter and saw his reflection in the surface. eyes older than when he'd pledged his vows. Across the yard, a woman shrieked. Jon pushed through the crowd. A spear wife lay on the ground, labor pains racking her. Blood darkened the snow. Midwives knelt. Jon knelt too, instinct overtaking rank. Through hours, he steadied her shoulders while midwives did their work. The child emerged breech but living, lungs testing new air with a war cry. Jon held the newborn one breath, tiny fingers curling around his glove. The mother wept, calling the babe Runa in memory of a sister lost to whites. Jon returned the child, rising on shaky legs. Blood soaked his cloak, yet it felt like ritual rather than ruin. Life spilled to greet life. Ghost brushed his thigh. Evening settled violet. Jon stared at torchlit faces. Wildling, brother, child, intermingled without malice. In their mingled breath, he sensed a future the wall had never allowed. Life without lines. Half a world south, in a joy-lit brothel of Volantis, Varys broke a wax seal. Spices perfumed the air. The parchment within bore news of Hardhome, of wildfire skies in the north. The spider's expression remained careful, but his heart raced. He traced a sigil scrawled at bottom corner, an arcane glyph used only by red priests as shorthand for destiny fulfilled. Fire cleanses, he murmured, but it can also unchain beasts. He folded the note and turned to a cloaked courier. Tell your mistress I serve the realm still. His eyes drifted to the window where moths battered lamplight. And the realm has awakened hungry. Somewhere east of the Dothraki Sea, Drogon spiraled low above cracked earth. Below him, a vast herd of stallions thundered, warriors brandishing a rack and bow. Drogon's shadow scattered them, yet they regrouped, raising dust that choked midday sun. Upon a dune of red sand stood a single rider, a youth with braid tipped in bronze rings, Khal Jacko. He stared as the dragon descended until land quaked. Drogon roared. The Khal's horse reared, nearly unseating him. Drogon's black eyes reflected the warrior, a flicker of bone, blood, and smallness. He beat his wings once and vaulted skyward, leaving the Khal clutching saddle pommel, reassessing myths. When the dust settled, the horde was kneeling, silent. Khal Jacko licked cracked lips, a vision of conquest kindling behind his gaze. A burning boat rode to salt waters, a foreign throne ripe. Across red sands a rumor galloped. The Stormborn's hearthspawn calls us. Break chains, cross sea. Days later, the first columns of wildlings trudged south beyond the last river, escorted by black cloaks and sworn swords sent by Sansa. Snowmelt turned trails to soup. Jon rode beside them on a borrowed Garen, ghost loping sentinel. Every mile they passed frozen corpses burned to ash days before. Piles of charred bone where whites had ambushed scouting parties. Now ravens' picks at edges. Jon thought of the shard Melisandre had foreseen, though he did not know it. In his gut lingered unease, victory brittle as rime. One morning they crested a ridge overlooking green spears of new grass. Tormund whooped. Children cheered, racing downhill as though forgiveness waited in blossoming heather. Jon remained astride, studying the distance. Far ahead, banners flapped, House Manderly's mermen, House Glover's mailed fist. Northern lords had ridden out to meet the living tide. He urged his Garen on. When he drew close, he saw Lord Wyman Manderly himself astride a white palfrey, cheeks ruddy. Beside him, Robert Glover in muted gray-green. Men he'd once called allies. Men who had named him king in the north before he set aside his crown. Their eyes were wary. Lord Commander, Manderly called, thick voice booming. You bring a flood. Can Winterfell feed them? Jon dismounted, boots squelching. We bring mouths, but hands too. They'll fell woods, hunt, fish mine. The north will be stronger. Glover's beard bristled. Stronger or ravenous? Grain stores thin since winter, and my folk remember raids, burnt barns. Jon met his gaze. This is a new age. Walls of ice no longer separate men from men. Help me prove it. His voice carried in the damp air. If we fail to share, we cede future wars. Silence stretched. Then a shout. Willa Manderly, Wyman's granddaughter, rode forward. Pale hair streamed. "They fought the dead beside us," she called. "I saw a spearwife kill 3 whites to save my cousin. Will we greet such allies with closed doors?" Her words cut the hush. Murmurs rippled. Glover's stance slackened. Wyman's brow unfurrowed. At last Manderly raised a meaty hand. "Very well. We break bread." He turned, booming orders to men-at-arms. "Pitch field kitchens, gather game, slaughter 3 oxen." Glover eyed John. "One condition, Snow. Any who farm Glover land will answer my laws." "Fair." John clasped forearms with him. New covenant minted. Above them the sun-pierced cloud, warm for the first time anyone could remember. Snow hissed where it touched earth, becoming runnels that burbled south. That night fires ringed the camp. Ale flowed thin but welcome. Children of then shared marrow broth with Manderly lads, comparing scars like prizes. John sat with Tormund by the central blaze. Sparks spiraled into the velvet night. Ghost dozed at his back. For a time no one spoke, savoring peace sonorous as deep water. Tormund broke silence first. "Never thought to die of old age, Crow." He dragged a swig of ale across his beard. "But I'll take the chance." John managed a faint laugh. Heat pulsed against his face. "Live long enough to regret it, eh?" "Regret nothing." The giant man's grin glimmered. "Except maybe trusting kings." He winked. John's smile dimmed as he stared into coals. Memory flickered. Robb's crown toppling, Stannis burning, the Night King's shatter, Drogon wheeling in blood-orange sky. He thought of crowns passing from hand to hand like torches, scorching flesh. Was it less dangerous when held by a dragon queen? He had no answer. Footfalls softened behind him. Sansa approached, wool cloak clasped with a direwolf brooch. Her blue eyes reflected flames. "I came as fast as the ravens." She surveyed the mingled throng. "You did it." "We did." John rose. The siblings embraced, the warmth between them fragile, fierce. When they parted, Sansa studied his weariness, lines deepening at his mouth. "You need rest," she said. "And allies. I sent word to Lord Royce, Lady Mormont, even Howland Reed. They will gather at Winterfell for a great moot. We must decide how the North stands in this new world." John nodded, yet his gaze strayed east, where a blood-red star winked low on the horizon, the glare of a forge not yet cooled. Sansa followed his eyes. "Do you think she comes?" she asked. John answered without breath. "Yes." On the 5th sunrise after Hardhome's inferno, Dragonstone's high towers received the first sighting of Queen Daenerys' returned son. A sentry blew a horn as Drogon's vast shadow spilled across the courtyard. Smiths dropped hammers, unsullied leveled spears only to lower them in awe. Drogon landed amid a hurricane of dust, wings folding with cathedral finality. Scales bore streaks of char and ice. Daenerys descended stone stairs, hair blowing, white and red cloak snapping. She approached, palms upward, whispering Valyrian lullabies. Drogon's neck curved, his snout meeting her hand. Through him she felt echoes. The scream of ice under fire, the death of something immense, a shard still lost. Tears she did not understand slipped down her cheeks. She pressed her brow to his warm scales. "Show me," she murmured. Images flooded her. A frost king shattered, a sword of living flame forged of draconic wrath, the ragged boy with snowdark eyes guiding broken people south. Jon Snow appeared often in Drogon's memory, standing defiant, sorrow-ringed, resolute. Daenerys felt a pulse in her heart like the beat of huge wings. Tyrion watched from an archway, dawn slanting gold across his scar. He read the queen's expression, wonder laced with longing, and sighed. Destiny would carve its ledger across all their backs, and he would have to keep track of which debts ran in blood. Weeks later, too few to mend swords, too many for anxious hearts, the Northern Moot convened in Winterfell's great hall. Lords Manderly, Glover, Reed, Royce of the Vale, Lady Lyanna Mormont bearing herself like a warhammer, even the now-returned wildling chiefs. Jon stood before them in black, Sansa at his right, Arya beside the door, hand on needle's hilt. The hall hummed. Talk of harvests, repair of holdfasts, balancing wildling integration, crowning a king or queen of renewed north. Voices rose. Lord Reed raised the specter of the Targaryen queen's approach. Lady Mormont barked. If she flies dragons to our hearth, she will kneel or burn. Jon stepped forward, voice cutting the din. Dragons did not burn us. One dragon saved us. Will we repay that with spite? Saved you at Hardhome, growled Galbart Glover. But we Southerners felt no dragonfire on our dead. We saved ourselves. And will continue to do so, Jon answered, by forging bonds beyond fear. He spoke of campfires shared by spearwives and manderly boys, of fields waiting to thaw, of new children named after dead on both sides. He spoke until the hall fell silent. Then Bran Stark, pale and distant in his wheeled chair, spoke for the first time all night. The world broke its long cycle, Bran murmured, voice echoing despite its softness. The drawn bow of seasons may snap back harder. We must bend or break with it. Silence thickened. Lords shifted. Sansa lifted her chin, words poised on her tongue. Then a horn blared outside, deep and singular. The doors burst open. A stable hand stumbled in, eyes round. Rider in the sky, he gasped. Dragon. The moot erupted. Jon turned, blood hammering. Through the open door, he saw villagers pour into the courtyard, necks craned to blazing heavens. He felt a twist in his gut. Fear, hope, something more primal. He strode for the door. Sansa seized his arm. Wait. Jon looked down. If she comes in peace, we answer with peace. He paused, eyes softening. If she comes in fire, we meet it together. Sansa released him, nodding once. As Jon stepped into frigid daylight, thunder shook the air, enormous wings carving white peaks of cloud. Drogon descended, scales glinting blood-red in sunset glare. His roar rattled window panes. Behind him, smaller silhouettes, regal vibrant green, Viserion golden. 3 dragons now poised above Winterfell. Snow devils danced as the beasts beat their wings. The castle trembled. Men raised shields. Women clasped children. Horses reared. Jon stood alone in the courtyard, cloak snapping. Ghost at his side, hackles bristling but silent. Drogon landed first, crushing stone. Regal and Viserion circled, landing on outer battlements. The earth shook. Jon's teeth clicked. Snow whirled. Hot wind wafted, carrying sulfur and flame. A figure dropped from Drogon's neck, braided hair whipping silver. Armor of dragon scale glinted beneath white fur. Daenerys Stormborn advanced, boots crunching, eyes molten violet. The space between them hummed. Jon dipped his head in measured respect. Your Grace. Daenerys halted an arm's length away, gaze flicking to Ghost, then to the towers, the crowd of northern lords spilling from the gate. Atop the battlement, Arya tracked her like a hawk. Sansa watched with queen-ly distance. Bran's lips moved, unspeaking. Daenerys' voice emerged low, trembling with horizon-wide weight. It seems I owe you thanks, Lord Snow, for guarding my son at Hardhome. Jon's throat tightened. He saved us, and you saved his brothers on the frozen lake, she countered. Perhaps we save each other. Her breath fogged between them despite the heat radiating off Drogon. But the world is already sharpening its knives for us. Jon glanced at his assembled kin, fear writ across brave faces. Then let us blunt them. He extended his gloved hand. After a breath that felt like a lifetime, Daenerys placed her fingers atop his. Fire met ice in fragile clasp. Around them a hush fell heavier than snowfall. From the ramparts Lord Glover watched, disdain warred with awe. Lady Mormont's chin jutted, unreadable. Sansa's blue eyes gleamed, calculating calm. Bran's gaze pierced distance, watching ravens wheel above. Daenerys spoke again, soft but carrying. I did not come to conquer the north. I came to honor what was lost and build what might be. She spread her arms, cloak billowing. In the south, a lioness grips the realm by its throat. Help me loosen her claws. Then the north may rule itself free. Murmurs caught like sparks. Jon studied her, saw truth under ambition, grief under flame. My people bled saving this world. They will not bend knee to any tyrant. I would not ask them to bend, Daenerys said, stepping closer. I ask them to choose. Jon inhaled, felt winter wind, felt dragon heat. We choose tomorrow. Above them Drogon rumbled deep, a living furnace. Snow melted to mud. The first star blinked OV. Erhead. In that moment the world pivoted. Not on prophecy, not even on dragons, but on two bruised hearts clasped over the ashes of a threat outburned. Night seeped into Winterfell. Fires dotted courtyards, flickering under dragon-looming silhouettes. In the gods would Jon found Bran beneath the weirwood's bleeding leaves. The moon silvered Bran's hollow cheeks. You saw this coming, Jon murmured. Bran's voice sounded older than his years. I saw pieces. 'Tis it? What we do now decides whether those threads weave cloaks or nooses. Jon knelt. Will peace hold? Bran's pupils dilated until whites vanished. A shard of the night still beats, he whispered. Not man, not death. It seeks flesh strong enough to bear winter's ghost again. Jon swallowed. Where? Everywhere frozen blood spilled. Bran's eyes focused. Hardhome's ridge-birthed cinders soaked in magic older than men. If those cinders find hosts, the long night breathes again, without kings to command it, only hunger. Jon rose, cloak rippling. He thought of the embers buried beneath ice and slag, of scavenging crows and foolish treasure hunters. Then we must find them first. Bran nodded, gaze distant once more. Fire ended the Night King. Perhaps only fire will end his echo. Jon turned toward the looming shapes of dragons beyond stone walls. Flame enough to forge futures or cauterize wounds. He left the gods' wood, snow crunching soft, determination forging itself in each step. Days stretched into a slow dance of diplomacy. Daenerys met northern lords around great hearths, speaking of shared peril, of fair trade routes, of burning slave markets to ash. Many balked, others warmed. Tormund drank strong wine with unsullied officers, trading jokes that needed translating twice. Gilly taught free folk children to read from Maester primers. Sansa drafted new grain levies that spared northern cupboards while feeding the flood of new souls. The castle bustled like a forge hammered by opposing hammers of fear and hope. Jon and Daenerys spoke often, on ramparts in crypts beside dragons. They shared histories, griefs, visions. Trust grew not as wildfire but as banked embers coaxed to flame by steady breath. Yet shadows clung. Rumors of Jon's true parentage whispered in hallways, the question of northern sovereignty, the mystery of ice-shard remnants. One morning Daenerys found Jon at the forge, watching Gendry Baratheon-shaped Valyrian steel gifted from Dragonstone. Sparks sprayed. She joined him quietly. He says dragon fire alone can re-temper the metal, Jon said, wiping soot from his cheek. Your children carry the bellows. Daenerys watched Gendry dunk glowing blade in oil, steam wafting. A new weapon for a new enemy? Jon's jaw tightened. Or an old enemy reborn. She studied him. I would ride with you to Hardhome, burn every inch of that ridge until nothing ancient stirs. A relief Jon hadn't acknowledged flared within. We leave at dawn, then. Their eyes held. In the forge's glow something unspoken sparked, tempered, biding. Thus it was that on a steel-blue morning 2 dragons lifted from Winterfell's yard, riders clad in furs and iron. Regal bore Jon, who clung to the ridges behind the beast's skull, the world a blur of wind-whipped tears. Drogon bore Daenerys, crimson wings splitting clouds. Ghost remained below, howling. Sansa watched from the battlements, heart tight, her brother ascending into myth. They soared northward, snowdrifts spiraling beneath wing beats. When the shivering sea came into view, Daenerys banked Drogon over the ridge once ruled by cold. From above, Hardhome looked oddly small, charred crater ringed by fractured ice, like a wound scabbed. Regal circled lower. Jon spied black stains, glass-like shards protruding from snow. 5, no, 7 of them, each the size of a sword hilt, pulsing faint blue at the heart. He signaled. Regal landed amid swirling ash. Jon dismounted, boots crunching slag-fused rock. Cold seeped through soles. He approached a shard. Frost breath fogged. Within the translucent core, motes of azure lightning writhed, as if seeking cracks outward. Daenerys slid from Drogon. Their dragons crouched, nostrils flaring. "What are they?" she asked. "Remnants," Jon muttered, kneeling. He drew Longclaw, pressed the Valyrian blade to the shard. A hiss. Frost crystals sizzled. The shard quivered. Daenerys extended a hand. Cautious. Together, they placed palms atop the shard. Drogon roared. Regal's throat vibrated. Heat shivered through the rock until it glowed red, then white. With a crack like splintering oak, the shard exploded to powder. Wind whisked it away. They turned, seeking the next. Dragons lumbered, exhaling flames stoked bright. Shard after shard shattered under steel and fire. The sun dipped, bleeding. When at last the ridge lay smooth and black, no blue pulses remained. Jon exhaled long. Daenerys wiped soot from her cheek. "If any survived, then we hunt them wherever snow remembers." He sheathed Longclaw. "But I think..." The song fades. She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "Then a new tune can rise." Jon returned her gaze and found warmth even in the corpse of winter. For a heartbeat, the haunted restlessness dissolved, replaced by a promise he dared not name. Above them dragons roared, the sound reverberating across empty sea, across mountains, across kingdoms still learning how to live unafraid. The call reached ravens on wing, reached hearts huddled in distant hearths, reached tyrants sharpening bolts. It was not a roar of war, nor a cry of conquest. It was an announcement. The long night was truly done, and the world would burn or bloom under new suns. Jon mounted Regal again. Drogon lifted first, wings hammering dusk. Regal followed, green flame patterning the sky. Beneath their shadow the charred ridge cooled, barren now, yet fertile in its silence. Seas whispered. Snowflakes melted before touching scorched ground. And where 7 shards had burned away, nothing remained but glassy black stone. Mute witness to the day death died twice. They flew south toward the shape of tomorrow, the wind carrying the mingled scents of salt and cinder, and in the distance Winterfell's fires beckoned like stars reborn. The dragons wheeled south through thinning cloud, their shadows sliding over the pale expanse of the gift like dark, swift-moving continents. Jon clung to the ridges of Regal's neck, muscles burning from hours in the saddle of lung and scale, but each tilt of the great beast's wings filled him with a fierce, unspoken exhilaration. Below, the world unrolled in slow panoramas. A silver ribbon of river threading spruce forests, a scattering of half-frozen ponds where migrating swans traced wavering runes upon the ice, and now, far ahead, the squat defensive towers of Castle Serwyn raising smoke like muted beacons. A thin dusk settled by the time Winterfell's crenellations emerged, torches already guttering in the snow-patched courtyards. As the dragons descended, blasts of warm downdraft scattered fresh drifts across the bailey. Regal set down first, talons crunching through ice-crusted mud. Nevertheless, the castle folk braced themselves, clutching cloaks to faces as snow spiraled in searing eddies. Drogon alighted beside his brother with the massive contentment of a king reclaiming a throne, neck craning to study the grounds that only weeks before had seemed scarcely wide enough to hold him. Jon slid from his perch, landing unsteadily. His thighs screamed protest at the motion, but a sharper pain leapt in his chest as he caught sight of the crowd waiting beyond the stables. Wildling children balanced on overturned barrels for a better view. Northern men-at-arms gripped spears half in awe, half in dread. Sansa stood at the fore, her mantle of ice-gray fur lifting in Drogon's wake. Next to her hovered Tyrion, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Daenerys dismounted with the silent surety of someone long accustomed to impossible heights. A hush rippled outward, expectant, brittle. Snow dusted her silver hair. Sparks of dying daylight caught in the polished obsidian plates sewn along the seams of her riding leathers, so she seemed armored in midnight stars. Jon met her gaze across the small gap, and for a breath the weight of war, prophecy, and kingdom lessened beneath the simple recognition that neither of them had fallen prey to fire nor to fear. He stepped forward until they were side by side, dragons exhaling steam behind them like forged chimneys still cooling. Ghost broke from the ring of onlookers first, throwing his lanky white bulk against Jon's legs. The direwolf's muzzle was warm and reassuring beneath Jon's gloved hand, a tether to the ground. Only then did voices rise, cautious hails, murmured prayers of thanks, the shriller laughter of children who watched dragons with the same delight others reserved for festival puppets. Sansa approached, each footfall deliberate. Her eyes darted from Jon's soot-stained cloak to Daenerys's gauntlets and back again. "Did you find what you sought?" "In pieces," Jon said, "and those pieces in ash." "May the gods keep them ash," Sansa murmured, but her attention lingered on Daenerys. "Your grace, Winterfell offers its hearth. You'll want rest and food," Tyrion cut in, stepping forward with a wry tilt of his head. "And preferably a cask of ale stronger than the vintage the Unsullied attempted to brew in Meereen." A twitch touched Sansa's mouth. "The North can oblige." Stable hands led the dragons toward a newly reinforced paddock, more moat than pen, ringed with ditches of snowmelt that steamed where Drogon's last exhale still scorched stone. Rhaegal shuffled behind, content but restless, turning his head as if counting every watchtower. As the crowd dispersed, Jon and Daenerys followed Sansa toward the great hall. Servants hurried ahead to stoke the hearths. A tall young man Jon barely recognized as Robin Arryn bowed stiffly, cheeks mottled red with cold. Bronze Yohn Royce loomed ahead behind the boy. His eyes took dragons in stride but flickered to Daenerys with an unspoken warning that night-forged honor seldom bowed to foreign queens. Inside, warmth pooled in smoky rafters. Long tables groaned beneath trenchers of oat bread, wheels of pale cheese, and venison stew spiced with juniper that left lips tingling. Jon guided Daenerys to the high table, though neither felt quite comfortable in its carved oak grandeur. He could almost hear Maester Luwin listing the dead Starks whose ghosts still claimed those seats. Lady Lyanna Mormont climbed onto her bench with a thump, eyes like black diamonds fixed on Daenerys. "Is it true a single breath from the Black One turned the Night King to steam?" "A single flame," Daenerys answered evenly, "but my dragon's breath carried it." Lyanna nodded as if ticking icons off a ledger. "Good." She grabbed her mug and drank deep. "Better use those flames on Cersei next." Tyrion coughed delicately. "As gratifying as the idea is, tactics thrive on particulars. King's Landing holds 50-foot walls, 300 scorpions. Soon perhaps more, if Qyburn's clever fingers grasp new toys. And a population who would suffer dearly should dragons scorch the streets." Sansa folded her hands. "A siege could starve the city." Jon shook his head. "A starving city turns dangerous. Riots, plague, refugees. They'll spread faster than wildfire." "Like wildfire?" Tyrion muttered darkly, but Daenerys caught the echo. She remembered seraphim green flames leaping above the Blackwater tide years before she set foot in Westeros, the pyres that burned fathers into orphans. The hall's warmth seemed to recede as memory's cold took her. "We will not become what we replace," she said, voice pitched low but resonant. "If Cersei shuts her gates, we bring down her gates. Clean, decisive, sparing innocence." "War seldom spares innocence," Lord Royce observed. His weathered face betrayed no disdain, only tired realism honed by campaigns south of the Vale. "Yet, if the northern host rides, the Vale will answer." His nod to Robin Arryn bore a father's shadow. Conversations branched like frost fractals. Wyman Manderley negotiating oat barge routes through White Harbor. Tormund loudly describing the taste of boiled mammoth ribs to a horrified Davos. Gendry trading hammer techniques with a grizzled blacksmith from Deepwood Mott. Each thread wove the greater fabric of a realm gingerly shifting from survival to ambition. Jon ate little, distracted by a tremor in his bones that did not originate from cold. Too much moved too quickly, yet he had urged it forward by inviting Daenerys into these halls. He felt the eyes of lords weighing every expression between them, measuring trust, measuring threat, measuring the possibility that man of snow and woman of storm might together melt the old fabrics holding them. Late, once fires dwindled to red pockets still gnawing oak logs, Jon stepped out into the yard for breath. Stars blazed, frost crisped underfoot, ghosts slunk somewhere in the stables, stalking the smell of blood on raw hides. Jon turned memories over, the echo of the Night King's shatter, the shudder of shards beneath his palm, Bran's warning that some echo remained. Even now he half expected a whisper beneath the wind's whistle, a sleek blade of cold tracing his nape. Footsteps approached. Daenerys joined him, cloak of undyed wool wrapped tight. She looked up at towers crowned in rime and icicles glittering like daggers. "Your home is beautiful. It's had time to learn." Jon's exhale hung a moment before dispersing. Winter carves beauty out of what survives. A quiet stretched, companionable, brimming. Jon glanced sideways. Her face glowed ghost-pale in starlight, mouth slightly parted, as if she tasted the cold deliberately. He thought of kisses shared in a ship's cabin and the confusion that followed. Yet now no cabin's walls hemmed them, only infinite sky. Still, the world sprawled around them fraught with obligations. She broke the hush first. "If we win the South, and peace endures, what life will you claim?" He considered. "The wall taught me there is no simple life left to claim. But I'd like to see the North's children grow without curfews and horns and whites at their heels." Her gaze slid back to him. "I would like to see what blooms when winter truly ends. At Hardhome, I thought life ended with snow." He flexed his glove unconsciously. "Now I'm not sure if fire ended death or simply opened new doors." A flicker passed across her features. Fear not of dragons or kings, but of unseen hinges groaning. She reached out, fingertips grazing the leather of his sleeve. Heat pulsed through that whisper of contact, fragile yet undeniable. Jon felt the old watchman within him flinch, but something fiercer surged forward to steady. From above came an abrupt crack of wing, Drogon shifting on rampart perch. The castle walls creaked in faint alarm. Jon and Daenerys turned to watch dark muscle ripple under obsidian scales. Regal reply crooned from the god's wood perimeter, a tone of reassurance. "Even they're uneasy," Jon murmured. "They sense the shape of storms hours before winds shift." Her hand slid away. The air cooled. "We should rest. Tomorrow will ask more of us." He nodded. She left, cloak trailing. Jon remained, the imprint of her warmth lingering on his sleeve long after she vanished through the archway. By dawn, ravens outnumbered sparrows on Winterfell's rookery ledge, incoming from every spoke of the realm. Scrolls stamped with wax seals of House Baratheon, Tully, even the faint imprint of a thorn-wreathed rose lay stacked on a trestle for Maester Wolkan's sorting. One raven bore no sigil, only a single scrap of parchment tied with thread dyed midnight blue. Bran insisted on reading that one himself. Jon arrived as Wolkan parted the knotted cord. Bran's eyes glazed silver for a breath, as if reading the shapes before the paper had fully unfurled. The message was short. "In the ruins of northern shore villages, fishermen vanish though nets remain. A cold light flickers beneath the water at night. The waves freeze then crack like glass. Beware what tides still carry. A friend." Wolkan frowned, but Bran's fingers tightened on the parchment. "Eastwatch's wreckage draws scavengers, some human, some not," he murmured. "If echoes linger, they will gather where deep water remembers dead." Jon's pulse quickened. "How many dragons must we send to scour the sea?" "Fire above cannot touch darkness below," Bran said, "but light can reveal it." By midday Jon convened a war council in the small solar. Maps stretched across oak planks, pinned by tankards. Daenerys, Tyrion, Sansa, Arya, Davos, and Tormund ringed the table. Bran sat in his wheeled chair near the hearth, eyes distant even when gaze fixed. Jon shared the raven's warning. Sansa's jaw tightened. She traced the coastline with a gloved finger. If fishermen vanish, coastal villages will panic. Fear weakens loyalty faster than gold. Tyrion plucked at his beard. We cannot be everywhere at once. Perhaps the Ironborn. The Ironborn would ransom their own mothers if waves whispered profit. Davos shook his head. We need fast ships and sailors who value life. Men of the Shield Islands owe the North no fealty, yet they revere the Seven, Jon argued. Their longships cut shallow shoals. Send them, Daenerys said. But I'll not leave this threat to sailors alone. She turned toward Bran. What light can reveal darkness beneath water? Bran's pupils shrank, as though focusing across centuries. Sunfire captured in glass. Dragonfire fused sand into lens long ago. Maesters call it obsidian glass. That's myth, Davos huffed. I've seen red priests hold shadow glass that drinks candlelight, but that's trickery. Bran's gaze steadied on the old knight. Everything was myth until it breathed down our necks. Tyrion tapped the map. Sunfire or no, we still require a source. Sansa's eyes narrowed. Old Town. Wolkan, standing by the door, started. The high tower keeps vaults of relics, some from Valyria, dragonglass goblets, candles that burn without flame. Daenerys exchanged looks with Jon. If Old Town hoards weapons against emerging night, we must secure them before Cersei does. Tyrion sighed. The Citadel will not welcome dragon and wolf waltzing through its sanctums. They proclaim neutrality yet bend when gold clinks. We bring knowledge, not invasion, Jon insisted. Let Sam ride ahead, parley as brother and scholar. Davos smiled, lines deepening. The boys grown into courage. Decision settled, riders were dispatched south that very afternoon. Rangers of the Watch escorting Sam, Gilly, and the toddler across frost-slick passes. Sam carried letters bearing Jon's seal and Bran's, petitions for cooperation in the name of every living soul. He also bore a modest crate of obsidian arrowheads dredged from Dragonstone's caves, proof of the fire that had tempered them before memory. As hoofbeats faded beyond Winterfell's walls, Jon stood with Sam at the gate. You faced the first of them, Jon reminded softly. That steel still lives in you. Sam's cheeks reddened in the cold. Books sharpen hearts as well as swords. He adjusted the pack strap cutting into one shoulder. And hearts can pierce even the thickest maester robes. Jon smiled, clapped his friend's arm, and watched the party vanish down the King's Road. Far southeast, in the cavernous gloom beneath King's Landing's Red Keep, Qyburn oversaw the final test of his newest scorpion. Lamps flickered upon gilded axle, monstrous torsion arms wound tight with woven horsehair soak. In vinegar, a bolt of black steel lay cradled by the track, its tip coated in a resin that glimmered faint blue. Imported from the Shadowlands, Qyburn whispered to Cersei, who watched from a balcony slit. They say even dragonfire cannot melt this resin. It rather rejoices in heat, then bursts into shards sharp as razors. Cersei's lips curved. Let us rejoice with it. Two guards cranked the winch. The torsion arms groaned, locking. Qyburn raised a gaunt hand and the release cadre pulled the lever. The bolt screamed through the barrel. At the far wall of the practice tunnel, it struck a slab of granite shaped in crude dragon silhouette. Resin ignited on impact with a blinding white flash. Shards exploded outward, needle-thin flechettes embedding in stone, floor, and one unfortunate squire's shield, which sizzled where flechettes lodged. The air smelled of struck flint and something harsher, like burnt mint. Cersei's laughter dripped contentment. Tell your forges I want 100 by moon's turn. Qyburn bowed. The cost in coin and manpower will be paid by those who wish to live beneath my roof when dragons cast their second dawn. She turned. Do not fail me. Behind her, the slab glowed, fissures bleeding white light, as though some newborn sun tried to claw its way free. North again, days drifted into routines too busy to grant the luxury of worry. Smiths refitted dragonglass spearheads for free folk militias. Daenerys's blood riders bartered horse meat for oats with Manderly quartermasters. Tyrion convened nightly councils on how best to feed an army that now included Dothraki scouts galloping through the gift. Yet beneath bustle, tension coiled. Jon sensed it in the way Lords Glover and Karstark spoke through clenched jaws whenever unsullied columns drilled near the weirwood, in how Bran sometimes wheeled himself to the ramparts at dusk and stared so long eastward that frost rhymed his lashes. One harsh morning Bran summoned Arya. Jon found them in an upper solar, the glass panes throwing snow-filtered light across Bran's pale features. Arya knelt, listening intently. Jon stayed at the doorway until Bran's cloudy eyes flicked toward him. "We need a knife," Bran said. "One of Valyrian steel." Arya's hand brushed the steel grips of daggers at her belt. "Plenty round here. This one must fly," Bran answered. "Farther than a man can throw." Jon frowned. "You speak of a bow?" Bran shook his head. "Of wind shaping its own shaft. The maesters of Qarth once built such weapons. Slivers launched by storms captive in brass tubes." Arya arched a brow. "You want wildfire crossbows now?" "Not wildfire." Bran's voice thinned. "Sound." Jon stepped fully into the room. "Explain." Bran's fingers absently traced the groove of armrest. "The shard we destroyed at Hardhome shattered under dragonfire, but somewhere deeper beneath sea, a heart still beats. One of its echoes entered a corpse drifting ashore near Dire Denver. When fishermen found it, the corpse rose, eyes blue as moonstone. They burned it, but fire alone will not scour the spark that rides wind and water between corpses." Jon felt queasy. "How do we fight what moves like breath?" Bran's gaze locked on Arya. "With breath stronger." She crossed her arms. "You're speaking riddles." "A whistle carved from dragonglass," Bran said. "A note pitched to shatter frost magic. It must be blown at the source, not by lungs but by wind harnessed through steel." Tyrion's curiosity flared when Jon later recounted the conversation. "A dragonglass whistle, a tuning fork that destroys resonance." He paced, cloak swishing. "If Valyrian steel vibrates at certain frequencies, test enough alloys, find the note." He snapped his fingers. "We'll need Qyburn schematics for his scorpions." Jon's eyes narrowed. "We can't stroll into the Red Keep and request them." "No," Tyrion agreed, "but I know someone who can." Midnight found Tyrion alone at the hearth, quill scratching a coded letter. The flames painted worry into lines around his mouth. When at last he sanded the ink and folded the parchment, he whispered, "For you, dear brother." Bronn of the Blackwater arrived 2 nights later, slipping between warded gates at dawn with the easy familiarity of man who'd once called Winterfell a plodding northern muckheap. He greeted Tyrion with sardonic grin, flipping a dagger whose hilt now bore a tiny dragonglass inlay. "Lovely decor, Lannister," he said, sweeping a mock bow. "If you fancy scorpions, why not just steal the old girls?" "She guards them too closely," Tyrion sighed. "We need blueprints, not machines." Bronn shrugged. "Paper's lighter than metal. Precisely why you'll procure it." The Sellsword's grin widened. "And my price. Land south of the Trident once Cersei falls. Goldcloaks auctioned half of it to crown debts. The rest awaits a lord bold enough." Bronn weighed the proposition with a gambler's glint. "Throw in that brewing batch of northern whiskey they keep stashed under the keep and you have a deal." "Done." Tyrion held out his hand. They shook, binding mischief to mission. Snowmelt surged, swelling tributaries until bridges groaned. Sam's party reached Maidenpool to find plague tents dotting the riverbank. Stone-eyed corpses wrapped in greased cloth, faces frost-gray. A lone septon muttered over them, incense clinging vainly to stench. Gilly clutched little Sam tighter as they picked their way along the muddy verge. Inside the White Harbor Inn where they lodged, Sam wrote feverishly by candlelight. He cataloged symptoms: black veins, temperature too low for fever, eyes ringed blue before death. Pen shook as he dated the page. He had seen these marks in dead at Castle Black after the Fist of the First Men. The White Bite. He asked innkeeper for logs of every ship northbound. One vessel had sailed from the west coast of Skagos, carrying barrels of pickled cod. Rats scurried off when they docked. The crew spoke of a dead whale washed ashore, eyes shining blue, 3 days later the captain collapsed, blood freezing in his mouth. Sam knew then the heart brand sensed traveled currents, leaping host to host like sparks on dry tinder. He penned urgent dispatches to Winterfell. Plague of frost brews, needs fire and steel. Send orders to burn infected harbors. Delay fleets, we must cut line of contagion. The raven beat its wings into sleet. Sam prayed it would outrun the plague it warned of. At Winterfell, Dothraki outriders brought news that Khal Jacko's Khalasar crossed the narrow sea on captured Myrish Carracks, landing near Crackclaw Point. They cut a path inland, rounding up livestock with casual violence, setting hearths ablaze for sport. Glover burst into council raving that savage hordes now approached castles already strained feeding wildling refugees. Daenerys flushed at the report. They were my husband's blood riders, but not mine, she said. I broke no chains across narrow sea only to unleash new ones here. She donned riding leathers before the council had time to disagree. Drogon roared as she swung onto the saddle. Jon, unwilling to let her face a Khalasar alone, mounted regal. Tyrion watched them ascend with grim expression, turning to Sansa. And now the queen leaves us, like a torch carried into another room while shadows here grow bolder. Sansa's eyes did not leave the sky. A torch can't burn two places. Crackclaw Point smelled of brine and pine tar. Jacko's encampment sprawled among stunted oaks. Their sacred groves felled for cook fires upon which skewers of goat turned black. Dothraki dancers leapt around flames, braids jingling. Slaves, rag-still in chains, shivered near the surf. Drogon's arrival cracked revelry to silence. His shadow poured across tents as though night collapsed early. Warriors scattered. Horses screamed and threw riders. Jacko himself stood unmoving, a rack raised, hair ribbons snapping in the downdraft. Drogon landed, earth trembling. Daenerys dismounted before his neck fully lowered. Her stride cut through settling ash. Her Valyrian softened accent carried over high moaning wind. She addressed the call in Dothraki, voice molten iron. He had broken sacred ties by raiding those who had welcomed her banners. Those freed by her would not be enslaved anew. Jacko laughed, showing teeth capped in bronze. He boasted of storms at his back, seas parted by dragon screams, that fate itself crowned him call of the last Khalasar. He thrust his arak into the sand between them, a challenge old as grass. She answered with no weapon but flame. Drogon loosed a narrow spout that painted Jacko's arak white, then red, then liquid as it melted into the earth. Fear cracked Jacko's bravado. His horse bucked, sand smoldered. Daenerys' next words rang like raindrops on plate. Follow or burn. The Khalasar bowed as one. Dothraki knelt, forehead to earth that still hissed. Chains were struck from slaves, and the freed wept into ash. Jacko, stripped of power's veneer, was allowed to ride from the camp alone. Some say to sea, some say unto death. Jon watched all from Regal's shoulder. He felt the tide of devotion Daenerys commanded, and how swiftly blood responded to shows of elemental might. He also saw terror on freed farmers hiding behind trees, fear of any dragon's fidelity born of flame rather than promise. He resolved silently that should kings rise from ashes, they must tether dragons to justice, not spectacle. Back north, Bronn infiltrated kings landing disguised as a merchant of Braavosi lace. In a smoky room of the three-handed fisherman, he met an urchin who called herself Bells. She slipped him a tiny scroll purloined from Qyburn's workshop, sketches of scorpion limbs, tensile calculations, a note, resin brittle below freezing. Bronn's grin widened. He tipped the girl a silver stag and whispered, "Tell your mistress little birds sing sweet." Smuggling the blueprint out proved easier than leaving the city. Gold cloaks doubled patrols. Bronn hired a leaky skiff and hugged the coast, rowing in moonless dark until sails of a northern patrol sketched against starlight. Royce's men hauled him aboard, blades drawn, until he produced Tyrion's seal. He slept that night on coarse rope coils, dreaming of exploding bolts and how best to charge triple once war ended. Winterfell crowds thinned as new tasks called. Gendry relocated to an annex forge, experimenting on flute-shaped dragonglass ingots, striking them to chart resonance. Each pitch he recorded in neat charcoal script. Bran visited often, the watchers claiming his eyes filmed white when certain notes trembled. At last, one sliver of black sang high enough to shatter a bowl of ice at 10 paces. Glass gulls perched on rigging outside shattered in sympathetic chorus. Gendry dubbed the note the Frostbreaker. They encased the whistle in a hollow Valyrian steel tube reinforced with twisted brass. Davos carved runes, some old tongue he'd heard from Shireen once, words for warding flame. Arya tested the trigger mechanism, a pivot lever that allowed one-hand release. When fired with powder-driven gust forged from pulverized dragonbone mixed with sweat salt, the whistle screamed beyond mortal hearing. Every candle in the hall guttered. Ice crystals on the window frame burst to powder. Bran's breath fogged as though he'd inhaled winter. When he exhaled, frost traced veins on the whistle's casing, then withdrew. "This will wake the sea," Bran pronounced. Jon held the weapon's strange weight and wondered whether they'd built salvation or another myth. The raven from Sam arrived explosive with urgency. Jon read the parchment, felt his gut clench. Reports of Frostplague now spread through Duskendale, Rosby, White Harbor Keys. He summoned Daenerys immediately on her return. Her cheeks were still sun-kissed from Crackclaw Point but grew pallid listening to his account. "We can chase shards until world's end," she said, jaw set, "or we strike the beating heart." "Bran believes the heart drifts beneath water," Jon replied. "We must lure it." They traced coastlines on maps, following currents from Skagos down through the Bight and around Cape Kraken. The cold eddies would converge at the throat of the Mander near the arbor. If the heart sought warmth, blooded ports, it would follow that Ark Old Town squatted near the estuary, its harbor deeper than any along the south. "Then our enemy meets us at Old Town," Daenerys concluded. She closed her fist over the map, eyes lit by fire. "We go south with dragon and steel. She cannot hide beneath waves if we boil the sea above her." Jon nodded, though dread coiled in him like rope about to snap. They prepared orders. Gendry's Frostbreaker loaded into a reinforced scorpion mount on Rhaegal's saddle, Drogon's scales soot-oiled for maximum flare, unsullied spear companies outfitted with dragonglass pikes, northern archers with obsidian-tipped arrows packed into watertight quivers. Before dawn colored the sky, Daenerys visited Bran in the Godswood. Red leaves rustled though no wind stirred. Bran's voice came hushed. "In Old Town you will find more than you seek. Secrets locked by maesters, candles of obsidian that burn without flame. Keep them. The song will need every verse." Daenerys nodded, hand brushing the pale bark of the heart tree as though to seal covenant. In the stables, Jon checked Rhaegal's harness thrice. Arya slipped in with stealth sunlight barely caught. She pressed a slim bundle into his palm, needle wrapped in oilcloth. "Steel of home," she said. "Many blades, one blood." He tried to return it, but she shook her head. "I have others." Jon embraced her. He felt the hard bones of a girl forged into something sharp. When they broke apart, he caught glimpse of Sansa watching from the threshold, eyes glass-bright but steady. She approached, pressed a small carved direwolf into his hand, a token she'd whittled after Bran's first fall. "For luck," she murmured, "and for the pack." He tucked it into his belt pouch beside a dragonglass stone. "I'll bring it back." "Bring yourself," she corrected, managing half a smile. Tormund bellowed goodbyes loud enough to rattle roof tiles, promising to keep northern ale from spoiling. Tyrion clasped Jon's arm, words too soft for others. "Win soon. The game grows dull without pieces worth saving." Davos joined the southbound fleet to command sea escort, longships of the Shield Islands and Manderley warcogs painted bright with leaping mermen. They carried barrels of pitch to pour upon waters suspected of harboring shard-touched corpses. As suns rose pale behind gauzy clouds, dragons leapt skyward, fleet unfurled canvas, and Winterfell receded into whitened hills. Snow still fell, but spring's hum seeded each breath. At night, the flotilla anchored near Pebble Isle. Jon paced the deck of the Windproud, Rhaegal roost on a rocky outcrop offshore, tail flicking like a restless cat. Sailors muttered prayers. Some tried to sleep. Gendry crouched near the scorpion mount, making last-minute adjustments. The steel tube glimmered faint blue where dragonglass cruciform met Valyrian ridges. Daenerys joined Jon at the railing, cloak flaring. Waves slapped hull, phosphorescent with plankton awoken by passing keels. First we end plague. Her voice low, steady. Then we end Cersei. Jon studied the horizon, black stitched with faint silver. Thoughts churned. Shards of night, scorpions laced with resin. A city of bells that might shatter under dragon shriek. Peace could break before dawn, he murmured. Then we forge it anew. Her hand found his on the wooden rail, solid, burning. Stars wheeled above. Jon inhaled salt, pine, distant dragonfire musk. He closed his fingers around hers, binding promise to storm. Old Town's high tower pierced dawn like a pale spear. Gulls screamed, scent of kelp heavy. As the fleet rounded a shoal, the water changed, surface calmed. Yet the air grew knife-cold. Frost rhymed gunnels though sun stood clear. Davos shouted orders. Sailors scrambled to light braziers along decks for warmth. Jon felt the cold in his marrow even from Dragonback. Beneath the rippling green, shapes stirred, lank and sinuous, slithering through kelp fronds. One rose, a corpse of a porpoise, eyes glowing unnatural cerulean. It breached, mouth gaping without breath before sinking again, leaving a sheet of frost atop sea. Rhaegal growled deep. Jon signaled Davos with dragonbone horn. Manderly cogs advanced, catapults lobbing casks of flaming pitch. Fire struck water. Black tongues lashed. Frost hissed into steam. Yet for every patch boiled, new tendrils of cold blossomed elsewhere. Waves thickened to slush, impeding hulls. From the deep rose humanoid silhouettes. Sailors lost earlier in the voyage, now harrowed white, climbing anchor chains with frost-burnt fingers. Unsullied hurled spears. Archers loosed obsidian shafts. Some whites fell into water, shattering like brittle statues. Others reached decks, the ice within them hard as iron. Jon signaled Gendry. The smith hefted the frostbreaker, set the brass-tipped tube against Scorpion's cradle, and pulled the lever. Powder ignited with a hollow boom. The whistle launched, a blur of black singing too high for human ear. Sound rippled invisibly across harbor. Every pane of glass in the high tower chimed. Whites froze mid-lunge, eyes widening. Then, like spun sugar meeting flame, frost webs across their bodies cracked. The whites exploded into snow dust. Sea ice shattered into glittering shards. Water roiled in sudden release. In the wake's silence, a low hum throbbed from fathom's depth, as if a drum beaten by the world's heart. Jon turned just as a colossus surfaced beyond the fleet. An amorphous bloom of night glass, not quite solid, not water. Its form reminded Jon of the fissured shards, now grown monstrous. A pulsating black cloud shot through with lightning veins of blue. Within its core flickered what resembled a spine made of ice spears. Daenerys wheeled Drogon close. Flames churned in his throat, but Jon thrust a hand skyward. Wait! He remembered Sam's note. Fire alone will not scour spark that rides wind and water. The whistle's resonance disrupted magic's hold. They needed that song again, but stronger, sustained. Gendry scrambled to reload, but powder was damp. Jon's mind raced. Rhaegal's roar vibrated Jon's bones. The dragon's throat produced harmonics deeper than horns. If Rhaegal could echo the whistle's pitch, Jon urged his mount higher. He loosened his grip on reins adorning ridged scale and closed eyes, listening to the dragon's breaths. He hummed, low at first, then modulated pitch rising to mimic whistle's keening note. Rhaegal's chest vibrated beneath him. The dragon matched tone, projecting a sonic tremor that rippled across sky. Drogon joined, deeper timbre weaving harmony. The black bloom convulsed. Lightning veins flickered erratic. Jon pushed his voice higher, throat raw. Both dragons sustained resonance until the air seemed to shimmer. The bloom imploded with a thunderclap, spraying shards of harmless frost that fell like summer hail. Silence thundered louder than battle. Waves calmed. Frost melted. Dead fish bobbed belly up. Sailors stared, swords half-raised. Daenerys guided Drogon down, alighting on a mossy embankment outside Old Town's seawall. Jon landed beside her. They stood among reeds rippling in timid breeze, boots sinking into damp earth. "It's done," she whispered. "Or begun," Jon answered, though relief softened his words. From the city's open gates poured maesters in gray robes, led by Archmaester Brose, spectacles flashing. Sam burst from their midst, breathless, waving parchments, Valyrian glyphs detailing. Shadowglass candles, prophecies of the flame and the frost, notes on Scorpion's resin weakness to cold. He nearly wept at seeing Jon and Daenerys alive. The Archmaester bowed low. "Dragons have saved Old Town thrice in history," he said. "We stand ready to repay." Behind him bells tolled high and clear, not alarm but celebration. Yet Jon heard an echo of King's Landing's bells years ago, ringing before green fire swallowed ships. He prayed these bells would remain unshadowed. Days later, Old Town streets bustled as relief wagons loaded with cured meat and grain rolled north. Maesters fitted Regal's saddle with brass resonance chambers, amplifiers for harmonic breath. Gendry refined powder mixture to stay dry at sea. Tyrion's courier arrived with Qyburn schematics. Maesters pored over resin's molecular lattice, discovering that when cooled enough it became brittle, ironically yielding to northern frost. Daenerys stood atop the high tower balcony at sunset, wind tugging her hair. Jon joined, view unfolding into golden estuary where warships sat at anchor like satisfied beasts. He handed her a parchment. Sam's notes predicting plague spread now halted. Fate, it seemed, bent again, though still uncertain of final shape. "Cersei will not waste time," Daenerys said. "She'll seize fresh fear to tighten fists." Jon's hand brushed the carved stone Merlin. "Then we meet her with truth before fear festers." She turned, violet eyes lit by dying sun. "Together," he nodded. Words felt redundant. Together burned between them like beacon fire. In the red keep's dim throne room, Cersei heard of Old Town's salvation and slammed goblet against armrest, wine spattering. Qyburn flinched. Euron only grinned, teeth shark white. "They think themselves saviors," Cersei hissed. "Very well, we'll gift them martyrdom." She ordered every scorpion repositioned along city walls, archers drilled to target riders not beasts, and spies seated among Old Town's refugees to spread rumors of dragon-cast famine. Qyburn began distilling a new resin variant that boiled when exposed to high-pitched sound. Across Westeros, harvest moons rose over fields where small folk cautiously hoped no boots would march through grain this season. Children drew pictures in dust of wolves and dragons side by side. Minstrels composed half-remembered verses of how night fell to dawn-forged flame. Yet beneath the Dreadfort's collapsed crypts, something stirred. A scavenger had unearthed a blue-tinged pebble, pretty enough to trade for salt pork. As she tucked it into pocket, frost etched creeping lines up her wrist. She screamed once. North wind swallowed the sound. Time quickened its pulse. Armies convalesced, alliances soldered. Tormund led battalions of free folk south, their banners stitched with new sigil. An ice bear wreathed in red flames, declaring they stood not for north or south but for life unshackled. Bronn delivered Qyburn's blueprints to Tyrion, cashing his whiskey casks and extra parcel of gold teeth looted off Lannister cousins. He remained at Winterfell, drawn by rumor of a northern vintner concocting spiced wine potent enough to blind ravens in flight. Sansa oversaw letters to every house still wavering, promising that grain convoys under Dragonfire would reach them by winter's close if they swore no fealty to the Lioness. Arya escorted these couriers through bandit country, her shadow passing unseen across snow-slitted roads. Jon and Daenerys led joint exercises outside Old Town, teaching northern archers to fire from the high backs of unsullied shields while Dothraki cataphracts thundered flanks. Every soldier carried obsidian shards bound to belts, siblings to the whistle that had sung death's echo away. On the 15th day of flowering, Bran's ravens descended upon Old Town's harbor like a black tide. Each bore the same message. Frost spreading again from the ruins of the Dreadfort, where summer never fully melted snow. Jon read the note at dawn. Ice returns to where men spilled blood in rage, Bran wrote. If we do not salt those roots, branches will grow anew. Daenerys traced the line of coast up to the Dreadfort. We finished this before marching on King's Landing. They sailed north again, dragons scouting ahead. As decks pitched under swells, Jon contemplated how cycles persisted. Ice to fire, fire to ice. But this time they'd learned the tune that cracked the cycle's shell, letting possibility hatch. Night fog rolled thick as they neared Dreadfort's crumbling towers. Fires set by Bolton men years past still left black scars across stone. Snow drifted inside open halls. Yet what chilled hearts wasn't ruin. It was song, faint and sweet, emanating from the crypts. A lullaby of winter promising rest eternal. Sailors shivered though no wind touched them. In the crypts they found women and children frozen mid-stride. Eyes rhymed blue, no Frostbreaker's song to shield them. Jon's chest tightened, Daenerys's jaw steeled. They lit braziers, drove whites back with brandished torches. But new bodies emerged, stragglers who'd come seeking shelter across harsh miles. Jon's rage burned white-hot. He mounted regal within the courtyard, arrow notches and crumbling banners ghosting at edges of torchglow. From the battlements, Davos coordinated ground crews. Gendry aligned 3 Frostbreakers along wall embrasures. When Bran's ravens circled overhead, Jon sounded his dragon song again. This time the pitch deepened, harmonics woven with fury. Regal joined, Drogon counterpoint. The very stones hummed. Whites turned upward as if hearing a voice they worshipped then feared, limbs spasming. Blue flame flickered in their sockets before extinguishing. One by one they collapsed, scattering frost that vaporized in sunlight as dawn lanced through broken roof. Deep below, beneath the lowest vault, last fragment of Night's heart trembled, unable to flee. It cracked, exhaling a plume of smoke that smelled like centuries-old sorrow. Bran's ravens swooped through crypt vents, wings buffeting dust. Their caws drowned the fading heartbeat until it ceased. Jon felt the silence like balm on raw skin. He dismounted, kneeling among scattered ice splinters that melted into harmless water. He bowed head for those lost moments before their deaths, for those yet to live unafraid. Daenerys approached, laid a hand on his shoulder. We ended it at the place where men's cruelties fed its strongest, she whispered. He rose. Now we face the cruelty that remains. Their gazes turned south, past rivers, past fields, to a capital ruled by fear heavier than winter. King's Landing's distant walls glittered in imagination like serpent scales eager to taste dragon blood. But the song had changed. Bells would ring, people would choose, and even lions could bend before flame if offered a gentler dawn. They gathered their forces, ashes of night swirling to nothing behind them, and marched toward the last shadow on the board. Above, 2 dragons carved circles in brightening sky, roaring not in triumph but in challenge, telling every heart from Frostfangs to Arbor that the long night's ashes fed the first true spring. Cold gray dawn dissolved into a rain-washed morning as the host of dragon and wolf spilled from Old Town's eastern gates, banners snapping damply in a stiff onshore wind. Mud sucked at hooves. Wagon wheels carved deep furrows as they wended eastward across the bridgeworks of the Honeywine. A low murmur traveled the ranks. Men muttering prayers to the Seven, the old gods, the Lord of Light, even the many-faced God. Each hedge of faith seeking to brace a mortal soul for the work of unseating a lioness astride an iron throne. Jon Snow rode at the fore with Daenerys beside him, the 2 dragons circling high overhead, intermittent silhouettes that flickered across mist like living heraldry. Regal's wings were half-mended from a skirmish with a scorpion off Crackclaw Point. Drogon's scales still reflected ghost streaks of molten blue where the heart shard's resonance had kissed him. When they banked low, the army cheered, an exhalation of awe that washed over pikes and pavises and seemed to knit disparate companies into a single creature of purpose. Tyrion trundled in a covered wagon filled with casks of artillery powder, hunched over parchment, refining timetables and siege diagrams. every so often sticking his head out to bark at a quartermaster about maintenance or forage projections. Davos rode further back with the Shield Island captains, exchanging signals with outriders who streaked ahead to scout the Rose Road, bows ready for Sel's-word ambush. Tormund led the free folk, who found the Reach's rolling vineyards and orchards uncanny. Land that grew sweetness rather than scrag juniper and goat. They sang coarse songs in languages half forgotten, their laughter rowdy enough to scare away timid bandits long before steel need glinted. 2 leagues east, a column of refugees fleeing the frost plague trickled in wavering lines toward the city they hoped would shelter them from war. Jon commanded his vanguard to halt, dispatching the Queen's hand with a flag of truce. Tyrion met their leaders beneath a willow whose leaves dripped silver, promising them safe convoy back to cleared harbors and new farmland in the Mander Valley, if they would carry word that grain convoys bore the dragon's protection. Some believed him, others eyed unsullied spears and muttered of firestorms. But an empty stomach often proves more persuasive than fear. Most followed the line of carts returning to Old Town, singing low songs of parting. Those who stayed were given salted fish, blankets, and leave to camp outside the host until their hearts settled. That night fires studded the landscape like embers evenly cast from a great hearth. Jon walked the perimeter with Ghost, pausing at each cluster of soldiers, singing Stormlanders, silent Dothraki sharpening a rocks. Northern lads huddled around bowls of chickpea stew seasoned with Dornish peppers until tears ran freely. He offered nods, brief words, a hand laid on a trembling shoulder. He doubted these gestures would shield them from what awaited at Blackwater Bay, yet men fought harder when a commander's shadow passed among them under common starlight. At the largest fire near the command pavilion, Daenerys sat cross-legged upon a rolled carpet, palms outstretched to the flames, speaking softly in High Valyrian to Missandei, who braided her hair into a knot tight enough to withstand marauding south winds. When Jon approached, dragons overhead banked in slow loops, settling onto an outcropping of granite half a league away, their breaths writhing like twin furnaces in the dark. He sat across the fire. Heat licked his cheeks, mingling scent of pine resin and horse sweat. "They believe in you," he said quietly. She lifted a shoulder. "Fear and faith wear the same face in half-light. Tomorrow we cross into lands that never saw White Walkers nor plague. They fear only stories of dragons," Jon replied, watching sparks drift. "We must decide how loudly to roar." "We spoke of this." Her fingers traced firelight on a dagger's pommel, a gift from Yora long ago. "We roar when roaring spares more than it kills." She exhaled and the dagger glimmered. "When we reach King's Landing, I will parley once. If Cersei relinquishes the throne, the city stands. If she looses one bolt, she condemns her capital." Jon poked at a burning log with his scabbard tip. "She will loose 10,000 bolts, and her subjects may not know who to blame for the fire raining down." Daenerys' eyes flicked to Ghost's pale silhouette guarding them. "Then we make them know. We ride at dawn to Tumbleton and Bitterbridge, to show Reachmen a dragon's shadow that passes without scorching barns. By the time we camp at the Blackwater Rush, rumor will outrun us, rumor of restraint." She stood, dusting road grit from leggings. "Sleep, my lord. Tomorrow you ride point again." She touched his shoulder, a brief, grounding wait, then strode toward her tent beneath the distant glow of a moon now nearly full, its mottled surface seeming to watch like an old wary god. Jon listened to footsteps fade, then trailed fingers across a charred log, soaking warmth. His dreams that night were a tangle. White ravens scattering frost, bells shattering like glass, Targaryen banners dipped in snowmelt, Bran's unblinking eyes reflecting 1,000 branching futures. The march to Tumbleton took 3 days. Orchards heavy with late peaches bowed over dusty lanes. As the host passed, small folk emerged from barns to gape, clutching infants, uncertain whether to kneel or flee. A few bold children ran alongside outriders until mothers hauled them back by tunics. No one fired arrows. When night yielded to another mild day, envoys from House Footly approached under a flag sewn from a linen bedsheet. No house colors, just plain white. Surrender without resistance in exchange for stores. Daenerys met them outside a millhouse redolent with grain dust, granted assurances of market rights once peace held, and left them blinking as unsullied units distributed barley to farmers whose winter seed stock had withered behind Cersei's levies. Rumors bloomed as predicted. By the time the army reached Bitterbridge, its arrival felt less like invasion and more like some wandering miracle. Septons in lilac robes sang hymns of the return of dawn. Hedge maids decorated the shafts of northern spears with garlands until the soldiers politely removed them, fearing the blossoms might snag bowstrings. An old knight named Ser Tallad the Torrent knelt before Jon and begged permission to serve again, though gout twisted his feet. Jon accepted, posting Tallad in the baggage train where his stories of the First Blackfire Rebellion kept raw recruits awake deep into the night. News traveled quicker on quills than boot leather. Ravens from King's Landing reported a feverish doubling of watch rotations and Scorpion crews drilling at midday under the lash. Qyburn's alchemists now tested glass canisters brimming with colorless oil said to ignite only upon hearing dragon cries. Spies whispered of hidden caches throughout Flea Bottom where grateful poor stored bread stamped with a crowned stag. Evidence that House Baratheon loyalists still smoldered. Jaime Lannister was rumored to be locked in a windowless cell, courtesy of Euron's jealousy. Some whispered his silence might be bartered for victory. Tyrion absorbed these fragments like wine into parched earth. He drafted contingencies, assigned Davos to slip Goldcloak's false orders redirecting Scorpions to the wrong towers, and instructed Bronn to bribe an entire shift of pier guards to vanish the night the fleet set anchor. The host encamped finally upon the ridge above the Blackwater Rush, where summertime reeds scraped against greening banks and the water flashed copper in dusk. Above them, the squatter profile of King's Landing unfurled. A city of domes and turrets, smoke plumes and gulls, glitter at odds with the stench of tanneries drifting even here. Jon stood beside Daenerys atop a hillock, spying walls bristling with new iron. Long javelin-like bolts gleamed wickedly in winch grooves. He counted nearly 100 Scorpions visible, likely twice that number hidden. "It will be a slaughter if we fly straight at them," Jon said. "I will not," she replied. "We starve their courage, not their bellies. And we call them to remember who burned the Night King." Jon remembered Bran's caution about bells. "The city will ring them whether in surrender or panic. We must know which." She studied the river mouth where Davos's warships lurked behind a curve of delta, pennants lowered. "Your sister's spymaster waits on the east bank? Varys rides with Royce's riders," Jon affirmed. "He claims a network still in the Red Keep, though spiders seldom reveal all threads." Daenerys's lips tightened. "I trust webs less than wings." She inhaled, voice softening. "But I will try." An hour after sunset, 2 dragons rose with no soldiers in pursuit, only riders clad in black so the moon half hid them. They flew west, then widened an arc south, approaching the city from the bay rather than the road. Rhaegal dipped low enough that sail masts bobbed beneath his claws. Drogon soared high, silhouette swallowing stars. Their approach roused alarm horns and the clang of Scorpion winches. Yet Daenerys steered Drogon in gentle loops rather than dives, circling thrice above the domes of the Great September's charred ruin, showing fire without flame. Rhaegal answered in kind, his roar echoing through alleys. Citizens poured into streets half mesmerized, half terrified, but no buildings burned. When watchers on battlements loosed the first bolt, it arced harmlessly. They shot too early, range misjudged. Both dragons peeled away into clouds as quickly as they came, leaving King's Landing to grapple with the question of why it still stood. Back in camp, Tyrion raced to Jon's tent, face flushed with consequence. "The bells will toll by morning," he predicted between gulps of air. The queen inside walls sees fear in her soldiers' eyes. She must rattle sabers before doubt rusts them through. Jon pinched the bridge of his nose. "And she'll parade prisoners." "Exactly." Tyrion glanced at parchment clutched in his hand. "Birds say she threatens to behead Lord Edmure at dawn if any citizen even whispers allegiance to Targaryens." "Edmure is already half legend," Jon muttered. "His death may stir anger rather than fealty." "Perhaps," Tyrion said quietly, "but one death rarely ends at one." He hesitated, then added, "Jaime might be leveraged alike." Jon's brows knit. Do you truly believe Cersei would kill her twin? Tyrion's mouth twisted. I once believed she wouldn't blow half a city to wax a charm of victory. Yet here we are. He handed Jon the parchment, scrawled notes of Scorpion emplacements inside the Mudgate, vantage lines from Grand September rubble, timings of shift changes at the Red Keep's south turret. Bronn and I will slip into the city tonight, find Jaime, or fail. Either way, the engines by the shore must be destroyed before dawn. Jon scanned the sheet, passing it to Gendry, who had just entered, soot-smeared and eager. Take 200 archers, dragonglass arrowheads only for resurrection risk, rope ladders, tar pots, and Royce's climbers, Jon ordered. You'll hit the mud gate scorpions under cover of river fog. I'll keep Regal above, ready to drown any alarm in wings. He turned to Tormund, lingering at flap. Your wildlings know silent kills in darkness. Send them with Gendry. Tormund gave a wolfish grin. Silent as snow on fur. Under moonless sky, the raiding company boarded skiffs woven from shield boards and riverbent willow. Oars dipped soundless. Fog clung low, muffling the city's heartbeat. Gendry crouched in prow, Frostbreaker strapped across his back. His hammer hung at belt, but he prayed not to swing it. With striking iron drew screams from watchful night. They passed a merchant cog idling mid-river, hold empty, crew asleep. A cat's mule echoed somewhere along quay. The mud gate loomed soon. Stout oak doors reinforced after Stannis' assault, now studded with fresh iron bosses. Above, silhouettes of scorpion frames perched like monstrous spiders, limbs glistening with morning dew. Guards leaned over parapets, but half looked inland, scanning alleys for seditious whispers. A grappling hook sailed upward, bit into Crenel's slot. Wildlings climbed, knives between teeth. 2 breaths later, a muffled gurgle signaled success. Ropes lowered for more to scale. Archers followed, quivers rattling. Gendry ascended, sweat cold upon brow though night still. Warm. On the wall walk he saw first scorpion, its torsion arms carved with Lannister lions, bolt loaded and cocked. He motioned Tar.
Aspervi fe un corket a cleiar, painting excel groves.
Another struck flint. Blue flame whooshed soundless, molten resin sizzling then smoking. They repeated along parapet until 6 engines steamed quietly, metal bowstrings snapping when heat warped arms. A bell clanged deeper in city. Accidental or alert? No one knew. Gendry gestured retreat. As wildlings began descent, a shout rose below. A gold cloak rushed forth, horn to lips. An arrow took him in throat, but the note squealed half-formed before he collapsed. Another guard kicked over a brazier. Sparks flew. Torches flared across rampart. Gendry cursed, raised the Frostbreaker. He aimed down central stair where more gold cloaks charged. Lever pulled, blast hiss, unseen sound slicing. The charge halted. Men clutched helms, ears bleeding. Stone tiles cracked beneath them, torches snuffed. Darkness swallowed confusion. In that quiet, the raiders slipped over walls. Ropes slicing grooves in wood where weight accelerated descent. By the time bells tolled across the city, the mud gate scorpions lay twisted. Smoldering ruins and Gendry skiffs were halfway across the rush, figures hunched low, paddling with frantic hush. Regal's shadow roared above, drowning pursuit cries. Fog swallowed all. Inside the Red Keep's belly, Tyrion navigated passages he'd once raced drunk with Shay, now sorted with mildew and scurrying rats. Bronn trod barefoot behind, crossbow aimed at each corner. They crept past a guardroom where 2 red-faced Lannister recruits slumbered, dice spilled across barrel top. Tyrion retrieved keys from a nail, heart stuttering as he slid ring after ring looking for one etched with hand sigil. The cell block where Cersei reportedly kept her brother and remainder of dissenting highborn. The corridor stank of damp straw. When they reached the cell, torches flickered against black bars. Inside, Jaime sat on straw-matted floor, one arm heavily bandaged, beard grown wild. Recognition flickered, then a rush of desperate hope. Tyrion? His voice cracked. Tyrion fitted key, hands trembling. Mother always said I'd break you out again, he whispered with a grimace. Lock clicked. Jaime staggered upright, relief warping his smile. Bronn scanned Hall. Hugs later, lads. They hurried through tunnels toward the postern gate where a bribed guard awaited. Yet rounding one corner they met resistance in the form of Ser Robert Strong, the mountain, hulking in enameled armor, visor blank. He blocked corridor like a fortress gate. Jaime hissed, seeing the monstrosity that once bore his own sworn brother's visage twisted. Bronn raised crossbow, loosed a bolt. It thunked into plated chest, wobbling harmlessly. The mountain advanced. Tyrion swore, shoved Jaime aside. Bronn cocked again, aimed for eye slit but visor steels deflected. The mountain swung a mace. Air whooshed, stone shattered where Bronn had crouched seconds earlier.
Dust choquet passage.
Jaime, fighting with one hand, drew sword left-handed, thrust at joint in armor. Steel skittered. He ducked, mace grazed shoulder, knocking him into wall. Blood spattered. Tyrion grabbed a lantern, hurled oil at the mountain's helm. Bronn sparked flint. Flame crawled across visor. The monster roared, swatting at face. Opportunity opened. Jaime plunged sword into armpit seam deep. Black gore hissed. The mountain staggered, flame licking through visor holes. He lumbered forward, smashing lanterns, until corridor blazed. Bronn hauled Tyrion back. Triplet fled down stairwell with smoke curling behind. Behind them, the armored giant collapsed, helmet clanging, flames charring flesh like tallow. At the postern gate, the bribed guard lay dead. Euron's men had anticipated betrayal. Crossbow bolts sprouted from his back. A smaller mountain of corpses stood sentinel, 3 ironborn leaning against wall. Bronn cursed, "Boat to the ferry pier, quickly." They scrambled into darkness along outer yard, hugging shadows. From ramparts horns brayed, torches whipped wild. Yet confusion reigned. Scorpion sabotage, fire in cell blocks, dragons overhead. A storm of distractions that parted just enough for escape. At riverbank, a single skiff bobbed. They pushed off as arrows hissed. One lodged in stern. The river accepted them, sweeping toward friendly lines. By dawn the host outside city saw what dragons and saboteurs wrought. Half the mud gate parapet blackened, scorpions melted. Smoke tendrils coiled from red keep's inner ward. Bells told ragged, more panic than surrender. Jon rode the line, calming trembling horses. Daenerys, astride Drogon on ridge, lifted her gaze toward walls where banners sagged. Suddenly trumpets pealed along battlements. The main gate groaned open. A procession emerged, a single rider bearing a white flag, the standard of parley. Beside him shuffled a half-dozen thin figures bound at wrist. Lord Edmure Tully, 2 Tyrell cousins, and 3 town elders. The rider wore Lannister crimson but helm plume black. When close enough, he raised visor, Ser Bronn bruised, smirking. Behind him, Jaime atop borrowed roan, arm in sling. The camp erupted, gasps, exultant shouts. Jon spurred forward, meeting parley party halfway. Jaime hailed him with weary salute. Bronn announced, "Payment delivered. Lannister inside lost her best jailer. Your move, Crow-King." Jon escorted prisoners through lines. A hush fell. Daenerys circled overhead then landed, her cloak swirling like dark waterfall. She surveyed Jaime, one who had once killed her father. But the Mad King haunted no one left alive. War demanded stranger alliances. Jaime dismounted, walking to Daenerys with visible pain. He knelt. "I have come to end my sister's reign. She will kill half the city to spite you. Let me open gates from within. I know her secrets, hidden scorpion caches, wildfire jars in sewers. Give me the chance to spare the innocent." Daenerys studied him, this man who murdered her father to save King's Landing from wildfire once already. Firelight glimmered in violet eyes. A small nod. "One chance, Kingslayer. If you betray, dragons burn indiscriminate." Jaime bowed head. Tyrion placed a hand on his shoulder, silent forgiveness luminous in eyes bright with threat and relief. Together with Bronn and a dozen stealth-trained Unsullied, they remounted for the final infiltration. Inside the city, tension wound tighter than bowstring. Qyburn discovered melted scorpions, resin wasted, and fled to subterranean labs. Cersei paced the map room, crown casting harsh lines across flushed face. Reports contradicted. Dragons alive, mud gate aflame, Jaime escaped, prisoners freed. She wrenched a wine flagon, flung at wall. Red droplets dribbled down painted table's coastline. Euron swaggered in, armor dented from some misadventure. Let me take the silence upriver at first light, haul the black beast from sky with chain harpoons. He mimed pulling a line. Cersei's laughter brittle. You'd harpoon a mountain with a darning needle. She turned, voice dropping. Prepare the wildfire. If dragons breach the keep, we burn the city before giving it up. Qyburn returned, breathless. Your Grace. The vault we sealed beneath Baelor's September now flooded. Stabilization compromised. Then seal wells, rig sewers, she snapped. Let the city drown in green before bending knee. As aides scurried, the mountain, armor still scorched, clanked into chamber, helm blackened. He paused behind Cersei, silent sentinel. She smirked faintly, nourishing resolve from his looming presence. Dusk bled across ramparts. Jaime led infiltration team beneath King's Gate through an aqueduct known once to only three: him, Tyrion, Varys. Water there ran low, exposing walkway. They slipped inside. In labyrinth of tunnels, Jaime steered to armory where scorpion ammunition stacked 4 rows high. Unsullied poured lamp oil, set fuses, retreated. Explosions muffled by earth blossomed, quaking towers above. As structure shook, gold cloaks scrambled, unsure whether quake or attack. Jaime donned stolen cloak, led group upward to battlements where green-painted barrels waited. He saw quartz-shaped sigils on their corks, wildfire. Sweat chilled. Lannister men stationed there recognized him, hesitated. Jaime approached with sodden humility. I bring reinforcements, he said. Orders from the Queen to move these barrels to the riverfront. His old comrades deferred, still seeing air in those lines. They hefted barrels onto handcarts. As they rolled down ramp, Bronn winked and produced small oil flask trailing cloth. Distance gained, he tossed flame onto barrel tops.
Cartly.
They shoved down incline toward Scorpion Yard. Fire kissed vents, green erupted skyward. Bolts, tar, and men vanished in inferno that rocked eastern wall like cannonade. Bells pealed again, pain, not surrender. Cersei emerged onto tower balcony, saw smoke rising from 2 directions. Fear flicked across steel eyes. She turned to Mountain. Deploy last reserves at Red Keep roof. Dragons may strike now. At that moment Drogon burst through clouds above the city, banked but did not dive. His roar rippled over tiles. Residents below, already fleeing, scattered like leaves. Regal followed, weaving to east, yet neither breathed fire. They flew high, sowing awe, guiding eyes to Red Keep's towers rather than lanes where unsullied phalanxes now slipped in through breached gates, banners lowered to avoid Scorpion sight. On ridge outside walls, Jon watched formation's progress, Dothraki clearing alleys, northern archers settling atop warehouses. Ghost streaked beside him, nostrils flared at scent of battle. He drew Longclaw, voice low. Hold until bells change tune. Catapults behind lined battering stones but remained still. Within Red Keep, Jaime climbed stair to Queen's apartments. Guards recognized golden hair but frowned at bandaged arm. Her Grace gave no word, one muttered. Jaime drove a dagger through his throat before doubt matured. Another fell to bronze bolt. Unsullied rushed corridor, dispatching survivors. Blood-slick tiles once polished for royal receptions. Jaime entered the antechamber where Cersei stood before high windows, watching city writhe. Her smile faltered at his approach. You choose traitors. I choose the living, he said, voice brittle. Open the gates. Spare them. She lifted goblet, voice trembling with rage. Spare? They cheered my walks once. Now they whisper Dragon Queen. I will not trade one tyrant for another. He stepped closer. Then allow them to choose. Ring the bells. Surrender. Let us leave. His eyes flickered downward to her belly. Still flat, yet he imagined unborn child. For us. She hesitated, tears pricking. Behind, distant concussions rattled windows. Smoke curled through cracks. Mountain loomed. Jaime unsheathed. His left hand shook but steadied. "Stand down," he told the giant. Cersei touched Mountain's gauntlet. "Leave us." The monster lumbered aside, eyes ember-cold. Cersei stared at Jaime, fury cracking facade. "You would overthrow me for that girl?" "For everyone," he said. "For atonement." After eternity, goblet fell from her hand, wine pooling. She pressed palms to desk, shoulders trembling. "I will wring them." She looked up with eyes scarlet. "But this is not forgiveness." She brushed past, walking toward bell tower door. Jaime exhaled, sagged against wall. Bronn moved to support him. Unsullied Commander Grey Worm entered, nodding. Tyrion arrived moments later, face pale but triumphant. They followed in wary procession. The great September spell, cracked but still hoisted, tolled slow, mournful. In streets below, combat stilled. Northern archers lowered knocked shafts. Gold cloaks dropped swords. Mothers pressed children to breasts, weeping relief. Wildlings ceased plundering stalls. Dragons hovered motionless. On ridge, Jon heard bells roll through dusk air. He raised sword, signaled recall horns. His army stopped advance, but kept formation in case of betrayal. Drogon circled once, then landed upon ruined Sept Plaza, wings folding. Daenerys dismounted, hair whipping. She watched citizens kneel, some with faces pressed into mud. The city looked broken, not by fire but by fear and relief. She exhaled, shoulders easing. Yet nearby, a scorpion bolt thunked into column, fired from a rooftop where one last Ironborn crew refused surrender. Bolt nicked Drogon's shoulder. Blood hissed. In instant, his roar shook bones. Daenerys' eyes flared. She vaulted back into saddle, dragon serpentine in rage. With primal scream, Drogon unleashed torrent of flame, reducing rooftop to magma. A gust of hot wind spilled down street. Thatched stalls ignited. People screamed anew. Daenerys yanked reins, forcing Drogon skyward to avoid further spread. But flames had leapt alley to alley in heartbeat. Wildfire stores hidden beneath Butcher's Row erupted emerald. Plumes clawed heavens. Panic rippled. Jon saw blaze from ridge, green tongues licking rose-gold dusk. His pulse hammered. He spurred down slope, rallying water carriers. Regal soared low, blowing hurricane gusts to smother flames. Yet wildfire loved air. Explosions rocked, sending throngs surging. Inside Red Keep, shock jolted through halls. Cersei, at bell lever, watched Emerald Inferno bloom. A rictus of horror twisted her. Jaime seized her arm. "Order fire crews. We quench it." But she recoiled, hysteria taking hold.
No.
"Let it burn," she whispered. "If I cannot rule, then no one will?" Jaime spat, disgusted. He turned to Grey Worm. "Secure powder cellars. Flood them." Chaos thundered. Arya, disguised as Sparrow Vendor, guided children out a gate, knife-cutting ropes blocking alleyways. Tormund herded refugees toward river. Davos commandeered ferry barges, ferrying hundreds across to South Bank. Dothraki raced rooflines, tossing burning timbers to stone squares where unsullied stamped flame. High above, Drogon circled, Daenerys fighting to maintain control, blood rage and terror warring. A crossbow from remaining bull-headed guard loosed, missing but fueling fury. Flames danced along broken slum lines. She saw horrors of Meereen's siege again, tears streaking ash-flecked cheeks. Then a new sound rose. Clear, keening, not bell, not horn. The Frostbreaker's note. From a tower-top Gendry aimed upward, modulating screech that cut through roaring fire like a prayer. It reminded all of purpose. Not conquest, but life. Daenerys heard, steadied breath. She banked Drogon toward bay where wildfires flickered on water from spilled stores. Regal joined, their great wings beating in tandem to drive a wind that blew flames inland toward already burned blocks, starving them of fresh timber. Smoke parted. Rain clouds drawn by heated updrafts broke at last. Fat drops sizzled, hissing across rooftops. Green fire diminished. On ground Jon found Daenerys when she landed near Gate of the Gods, dismounting on shaking legs. He wrapped cloak around her shoulders. Soot streaked her cheeks. She whispered, voice hoarse, "No more fire." He nodded. They walked among smoldering ruin, ordering medics, water lines, tearing down still smoking beams. Where dragon flame had passed, some buildings stood gutted but did not collapse. Wildfire pockets snuffed by rain. As first starlight pierced dissipating smoke, the city fell into hushed shock. Cersei Lannister was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled of an escape through secret catacombs toward a waiting galley, though tides impeded departure. Qyburn's body was discovered crushed under fallen stone near his lab. Euron fled upriver with handful of Ironborn, pursued by Shield Island galleys. Atop the ramparts of the Red Keep, the Targaryen banner unfurled for first time in 2 decades. Red three-headed dragon on black, edges ragged from hurried stitching by Missandei through bitter night. Below, small folk gathered in squares, voices benumbed, then slowly rose into chant, strangely tentative, but growing, Dragon Queen, Dawnbringer. Children repeated words like new rhyme. Dawn tinted horizon pink. Smoke ribbons still drifted but milder. Jon and Daenerys ascended steps to Iron Throne Hall together, escorted by Grey Worm and Ser Davos. Shadows of twisted swords lined walls. The throne stood empty, blades glinting dull. Daenerys paused at threshold. She looked to Jon, question, dread, promise. He squeezed her hand once, then released. She stepped forward, feet echoing, cloak trailing soot stripes. She did not sit. Instead she turned to assembled survivors. Tyrion, Arya, Sansa newly arrived, wounded but upright soldiers, freed prisoners, distant lords cowed into attendance. Her voice carried, soft yet flint. She spoke of long night ended, of cities saved, of thrones that cut those who clutched too tight. She vowed council of realms, representation of each kingdom, tax of grain not blood. She pledged to rebuild the city she had nearly destroyed, to make it proof dragons could forge, not merely burn. Then, with eyes reflecting molten throne, she said a queen's reign must begin not with coronation but with atonement. She knelt before the crowd, queen upon knee. Murmurs rustled. Jon stepped forward, laying Longclaw before her. He knelt as well. One by one, others followed. Davos, Grey Worm, Arya, Missandei, Tormund, Gendry. Last was Sansa, who exhaled and bent knee, stark words melting like snow in spring. High on Broken Dome, ravens wheeled, sunlight gilding pinions. In that moment, the Iron Throne, fused swords of enemies, seemed less a seat and more a relic of darker age. Its shadow fell short of kneeling figures, as if power itself bowed to a dawn unknown. In the streets, survivors cleared rubble. Wildlings shared oatcakes with orphans. Dothraki watered horses beside gold cloaks who only hours before sought their deaths. The frost plague receded where flames had passed. Maesters studied shards now inert, melted by dragon song. Bells hung silent, waiting for hands to ring in better tidings. No one knew whether peace would hold 1 moon or 1,000, but through smoke-washed air drifted a scent seldom tasted in King's Landing. The promised scent of rain-damp earth after winter, of soil ready to catch seed. A direwolf's lone howl answered a dragon's distant echo, notes intertwining like threads of a new song rising over a city awake to first unclouded sunrise of many. And so the long night ended again. This time not in shatter of ice nor blaze of wildfire, but in the slow binding of wounds by hands once sworn enemies. In quiet courtyards children traced dragons in ash only to scrub them clean, laughing when gray stained their palms, proof that even marks of fire can be washed, given water and time. Moonlight silvered the scorched cobblestones, revealing fine rivulets of rain that chased soot through fractured mortar and down into the drains that still hissed with lingering heat. A stillness had settled over King's Landing that no one alive could remember. A hush so complete that each nailed boot heel, each snort of a skittish horse, rasped louder than a temple bell. In that uncanny quiet, couriers loped down alleys with scroll cases strapped to their backs. Healers navigated broken stairwells with sloshing jars of poppy milk. And through every breach in the city's once rigid hierarchy seeped an unexpected brotherhood, a sudden willingness to haul beams, share water, and ignore banners. Jon Snow stood beneath the flickering light of an overturned sconce in what had been the Hook's roughest street, a twisting ribbon of taverns and brothels, where sail-slingers had once stabbed one another for a single coin. Now the tavern shutters were flung wide to serve broth. The whores had become nurses, and the coin men were hefting stretchers. Jon swept his damp hair from his eyes, breath pluming faintly in cooling air, and watched a boy of maybe 10 seasons tug a barrow filled with broken masonry toward a growing rubble pile against the southern wall. "Hold a moment," Jon said, crouching beside the child. He heaved the heavier stone off the barrow and set it aside. "You've enough weight already." The boy blinked up, grimy face bright with sweat and pride. "Mother says we all rebuild, M-Lord. Dragon Queen spared us." Jon offered a tired smile. "She'll be glad of your help. What's your name?" "Bennett Rivers, M-Lord." The boy straightened as though the name alone possessed valor. "Well met, Bennett Rivers," Jon replied. "When your barrow is empty, come by the cistern on Cobbler's Walk. The Night's Watch stew kettle is there, and there'll be hot oats left for any worker." Eyes widening, Bennett nodded fiercely, then rattled his barrow onward. Jon rose, legs stiff from 3 days spent stalking fire breaks and ration lines. Behind him Ghost padded, nose low, occasionally nudging a corpse sleeve to ensure no blue shone behind a vacant stare. Even now, with the shard heart destroyed and Winter's song faded, Ghost distrusted stillness. By lamplight Jon reviewed a charcoal map scrawled by Gendry, districts marked safe, others slated for controlled demolition, a ring of temporary camps for the city's displaced. He traced the route to the Guildhall of Stonemasons, where Tormund currently cajoled craftsmen into reinforcing the mud gate with timber girders from the Kingwood stands upriver. He would visit them at dawn, bringing barrels of spruce pitch donated by the Tyrell cousins, payment, it seemed, for having not perished as Cersei's hostages. Wind shifted, and above the serrated silhouette of the Red Keep Jon saw Drogon's massive form hunched upon the half-ruined dome once crowned by the Sept's 7-pointed star. Regal roost further away on the shattered bell tower, tail curled around buttress like a burnished green serpent. Dragons had become gargoyles overlooking a city in convalescence, deterrent and reassurance in equal measure. Jon's pulse quickened. Daenerys would be descending soon for the Midnight Council. He turned from the ruined street, passing salvage teams sorting beams by length. At Mule's Gate he crossed sentries, their Lannister cloaks replaced by plain gray. Not yet the unsullied blue, not stark gray, but a neutral shade Missandei had ordered for the new city watch until loyalty steadied. They saluted without flourish. He climbed the terrace stairs 2 at a time, ghost quiet despite fatigue, and entered the audience chamber where earlier that day Maester Wolkin had supervised triage of stores. Now only 4 figures waited within. Tyrion by the hearth, Sansa upon a bench with quill poised, Arya lounging against a column cleaning a thin stiletto, and Grey Worm standing sentinel near the door that led to the keep's inner ramp. At Jon's arrival Tyrion lifted a pewter cup. "Still awake, Lord Commander? I half expected to find you asleep standing, like an overworked horse." The attempt at levity sounded leaden. Jon shook rein from cloak. "One more round of plans. Then I'll sleep in the straw with the rest." "You'll find straw a luxury tonight," Sansa murmured, her expression weary but resolute. Ink stained her gloves. Ledgers stacked beside her boots contained lists of every grain sack counted along the Rose Road. "We've taken stock. 22 days of bread if we stretch oats with barley husk. Longer if Riverland's barges arrive on schedule." Tyrion produced a second cup and offered it. Jon accepted, sipping watered wine that tasted of ash. How many still count themselves Queen's loyalists? "A few diehards," Arya said, flicking lint from dagger tip. Most lay down swords when they smelled dragon flame this close, but Euron's leftover Ironborn rove the shore. We patrol in pairs. Grey Worm's dark eyes lingered on Jon. Unsullied hold the dockyards. Any Ironborn that linger will answer. Jon lowered cup. Violence breeds violence. We hold, not provoke. Grey Worm inclined his head with minimalist agreement but said nothing. A rustle beyond the inner door. Missandei stepped through, cloak gleaming with mist. Her grace comes. A hush fell. Grey Worm snapped to attention. Daenerys entered, hair unbraided, face pale beneath lantern glow. The cloak Jon had draped on her shoulders earlier was gone. She wore plain riding leathers spattered with rain and soot. She looked smaller than legend, yet emanated quiet gravity that drew every gaze like iron filings to lodestone. "Forgive the hour," she began, voice husky from smoke. "I've walked the lower districts. They're calm, for now. We cannot delay distribution any longer. By sunrise, we must establish grain lines." Sansa stood, handing over ledgers. "These are tallies. The Tyrell cousins swear their granaries along the Mander remain full. If we dispatch Rohan, or whoever we choose as master of coin, they'll broker deliveries." Tyrion cleared throat. "We'll need temporary currency. Crown vaults are near empty. I will open Dragonstone coffers," Daenerys said, "and melt down any gold Euron left in the hold of the Silence." Grey Worm frowned subtly. "Our smith's busy forging horseshoes for Dothraki, but they will mold coin." Arya sheathed dagger. "Coin later. We still have vipers in the walls." Qyburn's apprentices fled into cellars with jars of that screaming oil. "I'll lead a sweep at dawn." Daenerys's jaw tightened. "Take Barristan's old cloak sigil. Any found hoarding wildfire will stand judged by city tribunal. Public, not by sword alone." Jon admired the restraint. He saw tremor in her right hand. She clasped wrist behind back, stilling it. "A tribunal requires a seat," he said. Tyrion's brow arched. "And who presides?" Even the faith militant lost half its septonate. Jon exhaled. "Choose 7, one from each kingdom present among the host. Not lords, but those who bled. A healer, a mason, a spearwife, an unsullied lieutenant, a Dothraki storyteller, an innkeep, a maester. Let them share judgment." The silence that followed felt like sunrise approaching. Then Daenerys nodded, faint smile thawing pallor. "It shall be so. Tyrion, draft the charters." Arya grinned sideways. "An innkeep on court. Wine might flow during sessions. Perhaps justice will taste kinder for it," Tyrion said, sipping. Missandei unfurled another scroll. "We must also speak of Ravensport. Lord Grafton has closed his harbor, citing fear of plague despite your proclamations." She handed note to Daenerys. "And who whispers plague into Grafton's ear?" Sansa muttered. "Cersei's envoys sailed north last moon." Jon shifted weight. "Send a maester delegation. Bran says frost plague cannot root without shards, and shards destroyed." "Show proof." Daenerys handed scroll to Jon. Their fingers brushed. Warmth shot up her spine despite fatigue. "Choose those you trust," she said softly. Grey Worm cleared throat. "We should rest. Dawn soon." Tyrion raised cup. "To dawn, then. May it arrive quietly for once." They dispersed, each to tasks. Jon lingered beside Daenerys. "You tremble," he murmured. "Only my body remembers," she whispered. "My mind is clear." She met his gaze, violet aglow with reflection of furnace still inside but tempered. "Walk with me." They stepped onto balcony overlooking courtyard where makeshift hospitals lay under canvas tarps. Rain had finally eased. The city below inhaled new air that smelled of damp stone rather than smoke. Somewhere a dog barked, alive. Dawn's first pale strip licked the horizon beyond the Blackwater rush. Daenerys spoke quietly. "All my life I dreamed of the Iron Throne. Yet tonight a boy hauling rubble gave me more purpose than any seat of swords." Jon's breath billowed. "If the throne cuts whoever sits upon it, perhaps we leave it empty." Her laugh was soft, tinged with relief. A council in its place. For a year. 10. However long until we know rule belongs to many. Jon reached into pocket, retrieved the carved direwolf Sansa had given. He pressed it into her palm. For luck, he said. She closed her fingers around would warm from his body, marveling at detail. A beast howling, snow carved along fir ridges. The pack survives. Lightning flashed distant at sea. They watched, arms nearly touching, while the line between night and dawning blurred. Morning sun glinted off a forest of newly raised poles at the Field of Ashes, a flat expanse outside the Dragon Gate where wagons laden with charred corpses awaited pyre rites. Maester Wolken oversaw a stacking of logs, his apprentices sprinkling pine resin to quicken flame. Unsullied formed silent squares, each soldier lighting small torches to pass one to another, until the field winked with 1,000 tiny suns. Jon approached with Ghost at heel. Tormund joined, hoisting a barrel to dribble oil along pyre bases. Free folk sang low dirges, songs not of grief but of the long night's ending. Daenerys arrived later, escorted by 2 Dothraki who carried baskets of wildflowers collected from the Reach fields trampled in their passage. She stepped alone between rows of pyres, dropping blossoms onto bodies wrapped in linen. Northern archers, Dothraki outriders, gold cloaks, children, mothers, even Lannister spearmen burnt by wildfire. Death cared little for sides. She paused before each shrouded form, whispering Valyrian blessings, until voice cracked. Tyrion lit the king pyre at center. Smoke spiraled into an impossible blue sky washed clean by rain. The dragons perched on opposite hillocks loosed twin roars, not threats but solemn horns. Flame crackled, resin popping like rainfall on roof tiles. Jon felt warmth against chilled skin. Tears blurred ash and sweat on cheeks. They remained until last ember guttered. Wind wafted ash over still green fields, nutrients returning to soil after years of siege. Farmers already seeded winter barley. Small folk would soon find sprouting among char a promise that life roots deeper than ruin. For many days the narrative grew outward. A company of Dothraki rode north, escorting Riverland's wagons to Winterfell and White Harbor with seed grain and salted fish. At Moat Cailin they paused, gazing upon expanses of virgin forest they might call home. Freed from fear of the black winds they once believed haunted the far north. Gendry supervised the Blackwater Forge, recasting thousands of melted scorpion arms into plowshares stamped with a sigil of intertwined wolf and dragon. Smiths from Gulltown, Tumbleton, and even Volantis came to learn Valyrian glass tempering with resonance plates, the new craft quickly called Ice Song Smithing. Archmaester Ambrose convened a conclave in what remained of the Great September's library, piecing together treatises on frost plague, wildfire resonance, and the ethics of alchemists. He insisted each maester returning to keep carry a shard of dragonglass whistle for study, cautioning that lost knowledge breeds future dark. Sansa sent ravens to every holdfast north of the Neck, announcing a conclave of winter to draft new defensive pacts that would not rely on a wall of ice nor a single house's fortunes but upon mutual stewardship of trade and grain. Lyanna Mormont rode south with 40 new Mormont spears to present their signatures in person. Varys, emerging from shadows at last, brokered fragile truces between disgraced Stormlords and Tyrell survivors, arguing that stability paid higher dividends than vengeance. He placed orphans into scriptoriums, citing that children with books seldom pick spears. Arya slipped one night aboard a Braavosi galley bound east, promising to return when lists became short and songs long. Some claimed a silver wolf watched from mast as she vanished beyond haze. Ser Brienne of Tarth arrived leading a host of Crackclaw serfs freed from Jacko's brief terror. She swore sword to the new tribunal, then set about drafting a charter for an Order of the Shield, knights oathbound not to crown but to the defense of small folk, answerable to council. Sam, Gilly, and Little Sam reached Old Town amid cheers, presenting to the Citadel their findings. That courage outside library walls can change scholarship inside. The Archmaesters debated slack-jawed when Sam produced dorsal bone of the great shard heart, humming faint in lamplight. In the Far East, soft-whispered rumors circulated of a foreign queen who bargained not in dragons but in seeds, and some Giscari slaver princes, facing rebellion stoked by tales of King's Landing's fall, began to dismantle their fighting pits, hoping trade partnerships might prove safer than chains. Yet within King's Landing itself, day-to-day repair tested ideals harder than any battle. Rats still scurried, sewers still choked. Thieves returned to alleys once soldiers marched out. On the 5th moon of the building season, a scaffolding collapse near Flea Bottom killed 12. Daenerys arrived within an hour, sleeves rolled, helping haul beams. When the last body was freed, she declared a builders' guild to standardize safe site practices, and tasked Gendry, bastard of Robert and now lord of the Riverside Forge, to lead training. Small folk began calling him Hammer of Hope. Jon embraced the mundane burdens. He visited bakeries to ensure flour allotments. He adjudicated quarrels between Dothraki horse lords and city butchers over grazing rights in orchard squares. He sat with maesters to draft guidelines for tri-monthly plague sweeps in riverside slums. In evenings he sparred with new recruits, showing them restraint. How to disarm without lethal blow, how to shepherd civilians in chaos. Ghost prowled corridors at night, teeth bared only when sensing hidden blades. Their greatest challenge came midsummer, when the Ironborn returned, Euron dead by mutiny, his first mate wielding silence like Black Banner. They blockaded Gullet, demanding gold and the head of the Sea Witch Queen. Daenerys met them at dawn astride Drogon above a flotilla of Tyrell and Shield Island galleys. Instead of torching them flat, she challenged their captain to single combat. If he won, they could raid the narrow sea unopposed. If she won, they swore to fish not pillage or face extinction. The Ironborn mocked until Drogon's claws raked their mast, snapping it like twig. Their captain swung an axe the size of a child. Daenerys vaulted from Drogon's neck onto deck, blade bright. The fight ended swift. One twist, axe clattering, and the captain knelt swearing salt oath. The Ironborn sailed home flying white sails. Trade routes reopened. Months turned. Grain stores swelled. Children born during siege took first steps on clean cobbles. Temple bells tolled each 8th day at midday, not in terror but marking tribunals where former gold cloaks, if guilty of murder, now labored rebuilding homes they'd once burned. Across squatter camps, tunes changed. Ballads of the Dragon Queen who burned Winter's King, of Wolf King who bridged the living and dragons, of the smith whose hammer sang Frostbreaker notes. And in every verse, underlying thread, fear yields to mercy stronger than flame. One cool autumn twilight Jon stood at the ramparts where formerly scorpion bolts had glimmered. Far below, lanterns flicked on in tidy rows, something the new steward of streets instituted to keep thieves discouraged. Smoke rose from smithies. Laughter drifted from a rebuilt in whose owner now served barley stew free to those carrying builder tokens. The city breathed. Footsteps behind, soft, measured. Daenerys joined, cloak clasped with matching direwolf dragon brooch newly forged. She leaned against stone, hair lifting in breeze scented with baking rye. "You promised me straw," Jon said wryly. "Straw." Her smile appeared warmer than dragon fire. "The night we shared maps. You said you'd sleep in straw after the last plans." He chuckled, low and rare. It was luxury then. She gazed to horizon where twin dragons rode updrafts, silhouettes against vermilion cloud. "Do you miss the wall?" He considered. "I miss the silence. But here," he gestured to sprawling patchwork of roofs. "Silence would be wrong. Cities should hum like hives." She nodded, remembering Myreen's hush after the harpy fell. How unnatural it felt until children's songs returned. "The council votes in 7 days. They'll likely name you Warden of the South now Horn Hill stands empty." He shrugged. "Titles chain, but chains remind of duty. I'll bear whatever weight needed." Her hand found his. "Not alone." He turned. In dusk their breath mingled. All the chaos, dead, and endless marching had forged them into alloy stronger than iron, hammered by loss, tempered by mercy. He lifted her hand, kissed knuckles scarred from pulling beams. Never alone. Below, bells pealed, a gentle, melodic pattern signaling evening bread lines open. No one panicked. Instead the city exhaled, doors opened, laughter echoed. John saw Bennett Rivers again, older by scarcely a season yet head higher, pushing a new barrow, this time brimming with loaves. He paused, looked up to ramparts and waved. John waved back. Daenerys leaned into him, voice barely above breeze. 5 years from now, I hope I forget the shape of the Iron Throne. But I will remember this. People fed at twilight under dragons who sleep in peace. John rested forehead against hers. And gardens blooming on ground salted by fear. Gardens, she echoed as though tasting the word. Come spring, we shall plant fruit trees along the Blackwater. Peaches from Tumbleton, lemons from Dorne. Let them bear sweeter legends than steel. They lingered until lanterns dimmed and stars prickled sky, until the dragons folded wings and settled for the night, until Ghost's white silhouette appeared at stair, landing waiting to escort them inside. As they descended, John glanced once more at the skyline reborn from ash and ruin. Whatever storms might come, rival claim, wild rumor, or subtle hunger for power, he felt certain the city possessed a backbone now. A lattice of cooperation stronger than mortar, spanning noble and common, dragon and wolf, spearwife and scholar. A song of ice and fire had ended its cacophonous crescendo and slid into a slower, surer movement. A symphony sustained by ordinary hearts beating together. And if somewhere distant, across mountains or beneath foreign seas, another shard of darkness should stir, he and the Dragon Queen would fly again, not as conquerors but as wardens of dawn, guardians of a world that had learned light can come from flame without turning everything it touches to cinder. For now, though, they sought sleep, not in straw, though straw had its virtues, but in a simple chamber rebuilt from collapsed guest quarters, its walls bare save a single direwolf carved from ash-gray wood and a three-headed dragon painted in charcoal on plaster. Wind murmured through open window. City sounds lulled rather than threatened. When at last candles guttered and darkness embraced them, they dreamed not of ice or fire, but of rivers running clear, of orchards heavy with blossoms, and of bells that might one day toll only to mark beginnings, not alarms. Outside, the first leaf of winter's next cycle drifted onto newly swept stone and lay there uncrushed until morning, testament that feet now stepped carefully in a city that once trembled beneath the fury of dragons and the chill of endless night. The first snow of the new winter arrived softly, too soft for the folk of King's Landing to fear it, yet heavy enough that dawn revealed pale roofs and the sluggish Blackwater steaming under a glaze of hoe. Arfrost. Children rushed from tenements, mouths open to catch flakes. Bakers cursed the chill that slowed their proofing dough. The sixth squad of Unsullied on dock patrol huffed white breath and pulled gray watchcloaks tighter around shoulders grown broad with long weeks of hauling ballast and barrels. The city's pulse, once a frenetic hammer blow, beat now like a muffled drum. Slower, steadier, and, if one pressed ear to the cobbles, filled with surprising warmth. Jon Snow trekked the narrow lanes before sunrise, Ghost loping ahead, paws leaving perfect prints in virgin powder. After so many years dreading storms that buried men alive and whites twice over, this delicate dusting felt like a gift. He paused at the newly named Queen's Orchard, an acre carved from the burnt shell of two manses near Visigna's Hill, where hundreds of saplings slept under straw mulch. Farmers from the Reach had taught street orphans to tuck burlap wraps about each trunk. Under those wraps, small buds were already swelling with the promise of peaches, lemons, dwarf apples. Jon knelt and brushed snow from one slender limb. It quivered under his mitten and stood upright again, resilient. Beyond the orchard, candlelight flickered in a modest timber hall where the first tribunal of 7 convened. Today they would hear the case of Mara the candlemaker, who'd hoarded wildfire vials in her cellar for protection. Yesterday they'd find a cell's word for looting a baker's flour. The day before, they'd awarded a winter-battered widow 3 goats from the royal herd after witnesses swore her husband died reinforcing the mud gate. Justice moved, perhaps slow as a glacier, but moved. Jon rose, leaving the orchard to the hush of snow, and followed Ghost through winding streets toward the hall. Inside, warmth enveloped him. Hearth smoke, beeswax candles, the particular aroma of chalk slate and damp wool. 7 wooden chairs formed a crescent on a dais. Each occupant wore no crown or chain of office, only a simple gray silk stole stitched with a tiny symbol of their trade. Hammer, quill, barley stalk, serpent, fish, torch, wheel. They rose when John entered. Grey Worm accompanied him, carrying parchment petitions. Behind came Maester Wolken with a satchel of linen tally strips. John greeted each with a nod, then yielded floor to Brenna of the Barley, the tribunal's eldest. Mara the candlemaker stood before them, eyes red. 2 wildfire flasks wrapped in rags sat on a low table, proof of guilt. She insisted the vials were heirlooms, passed by an uncle who once served pyromancers of the guild. She claimed she feared bandits more than dragons and sought only to shield her brood. The serpent stole healer rose and displayed a hand scarred by a recent flame burst. She spoke of lungs burned and skin sloughed from children's faces the day of the blockade. No more wildfire would endanger wards, she said. The fish stole innkeep asked whether Mara could trade candles for grain as restitution. After deliberation, tribunal decreed a quarter moon's carpentry labor in the field hospitals. Mara accepted, tears of gratitude mingling with shame and relief. Grey Worms, unsullied, escorted her to register. Once hall emptied, John conferred with the tribunal about the next docket. Allegations against 4 ironborn caught selling stolen arrowheads as dragon glass. Under new code, fraud threatened banishment to Wreckstone Isle to help rebuild the lighthouse. No small punishment for men who feared steady work more than gallows. As debate began, a herald burst in, cheeks flushed beneath scarf. "Envoys from Dorne, my lord," he gasped. "Princess Arianne herself." Halfway up Serpent's Walk, a hush swept the room. John dismissed tribunal to adjourn until noon. Minutes later, he strode to tower battlements overlooking the King's Gate where flags snapped in brisk east wind. There, a slender column rode under gold and red banners of House Martell. 50 spearmen, their helms lacquered orange. Behind, palanquins of lacquered cedar. Ahead, 2 riders bearing white cloaks as sign of safe passage. John signaled rampart sentries. Open. By the time Arianne Martell dismounted in the courtyard, Daenerys was descending stone steps with Missandei, Tyrion, and 3 Dothraki blood riders. The Dornish princess stepped forward, snowflakes fizzing in her dark curls, amber eyes assessing each figure with a tactician's stealth. She bowed gracefully before the Dragon Queen, then clasped her shoulders, trading the briefest kiss on each cheek, a custom rarely extended north of the Boneway. "My father passes into the night," Arianne said, voice low yet clear. "He bids me bear Dorne's answer. We choose sun, not shadow. The prince's pass stands open for grain convoys, and our fleets will escort your merchants through stepstones. But we ask one boon." She unfurled a ribbon-bound scroll, drawings of irrigation aqueducts, plans for ridge cisterns, and pointed to signatures of stonemasons. "The Red Sand Sea drinks our crops. Bring this northern technique of canal lining, and we feed half the realm year-round." She eyed John then, as though sensing his role in such alliances. "Share us water, Lord Snow, and our spears shield your trade." Daenerys accepted the plans, smile broad. "We rebuild not only towers, but rivers." She turned to John. "Will the North spare engineers?" John nodded. "Already training menders in mortar mixing. We'll send them after Thawfest." He gestured to Tyrion, who recorded names on ledger. Diplomacy concluded, Arianne raised hand. Her guards unloaded baskets of blood oranges, figs, saffron spice, and bolts of sun-dyed silk. The courtyard murmured approval, the first foreign bounty to cross the walls since siege ended. Later, at feast thrown in refurbished dragon pit, roofless still, yet canvas stretched over beams. Arianne tasted spiced lamb while observing dragons roost overhead. She spoke with Sansa regarding trade of Dornish glass for northern pelts, with Arya, newly returned incognito, about secret tunnels once used by sand snakes, and with Gendry about forging bronze pipes. Music from rivermen minstrels drifted across long trestle tables. Under flambeaux, glints of genuine laughter resurfaced in tired faces. But beyond lamplight, something else woke that night. Far along the coast where the Blackwater rush met churning sea, ragpickers scoured tidal flats for flotsam flushed downstream after wildfire explosions. Old Tom, gap-toothed and half-drunk on stolen mead, found a shard among twisted iron. A black glass splinter no larger than a finger, edges smooth, surface glossy. It pulsed faintly when he held it against moonlight. He felt a prickle along gums, as though inhaling smoke on a winter morn. Pocketing treasure, he limped home to shanty beneath the shattered mast of the Fury, dreaming of coin traders would pay for such a gem. By next dawn, Tom's neighbors heard screams. They found his hut shattered, boards iced. Old Tom rigid on floor, mouth agape, eyes twin sapphires. His fingers clutched the shard. Frost rippled out like spiderweb. Word raced upriver faster than barges. The plague is back. John responded first, riding with the Masons' wardens and 2 healers. They burned the hut, salted ground, and scoured shoreline. Maester Wolken studied Tom's remains. Blood iced in veins, shard fused to palm. Wolken's lungs shook. He'd thought the last echo of Night Kings might gone. In the council chamber, Bran Stark arrived a fortnight earlier with ravens, listened and spoke. A sliver of winter still drifts. The sea carried it from collapsed armories. He described cunning currents known to Hightower mariners, eddies that could trap shipwreck debris for months. Then he revealed worrisome truth. While dragon song shattered the heart and broke wights, fragments might linger inert until human heat reignited them. Daenerys clenched fists. "We thought the sea safe," Tyrion paced. "The sea is vast, impossible to patrol fully." Jon stared at map and recalled ghostly humming of shards. "We create a sanctuary of flame. Scour every cove within 2 leagues, station watchfires." Thus launched Operation Emberwatch. 20 longships crewed by mixed forces, Northmen, Tyrell sailors, Ironborn deathsworn, set sail along coast, each boat bearing 1 dragonglass resonator. Slender tubes that when struck emitted frostbreaker pitch discovered by Gendry. Atop each mast hung lanterns of red crystal. If shard detected via unnatural cold or resonance vibration, lantern turned blue. Then dragons would fly, melting tide. For 2 moons, Emberwatch patrolled. They found 6 more shards, smaller than Tom's but equally potent. Each time Regal or Drogon soared overhead, loosing measured fire, boiling water to steam that echoed across cliffs like thunder from a warm age awakening. As shards burned to vapor, strange phenomena occurred. Silvery fish leapt onto decks as though fleeing unseen terror. Dolphins accompanied hulls until flames finished, then vanished. Gulls circled but did not land. One dawn, a shard shattered before ignition and spilled tiny motes of light that faded, leaving sailors whispering of lost souls ascending. At last, Maester Ambrose declared coastal waters cleansed. Jon allowed boats to return. Emberwatch lanterns dimmed. Despite exhaustion, crews sang homecoming shanties about dragon-like guiding nets of living men. Winter's heart loosened. Spring seeped through cracks. In Queen's Orchard, buds burst. Bennett Rivers, now wearing a leathersmith's apron, joined apprentices grafting lemon science to peach trunks. His hands bore faint blue scars from frostwork hammering scorpion scrap into trowels. Mementos of war turned to growth. On a mild afternoon, Daenerys and Jon strolled through the orchard, marveling at blossoms. He plucked a peach flower, tucked it behind her ear. She laughed softly, recalling a girl she once knew in a garden of Karth. At the orchard's far fence they leaned on rail, surveying wagons heading north loaded with saplings. A raven sigil flagged their sides. Bran had commissioned groves at Winterfell, hoping to diversify diets beyond turnips. Daenerys turned to Jon. "It's nearly a year since Hardhome. Do you wonder what becomes of a sword when war's done?" Jon stroked Ghost's fur as the direwolf nudged his leg. "A sword can be a plowshare," he said, "but someone must still guard nights." She nodded. "Yet nights feel shorter now." Jon looked east where sunrise painted red keep gold. "Because we stand watch together." They returned to city where tribunal prepared for next challenge, forging laws for trade tariffs and river ferries. Blacksmiths hammered crates of coins stamped with intertwined sigils. On one side the 3-headed dragon, on the other the direwolf. Along rim the words "Beneath One Sky." Market stalls displayed them like talismans. During Solstice Festival, Sansa served as ceremonial judge in a baking contest. Her laughter rang pure. Arya, disguised as juggler, tossed knives to children's gasps, then slipped away to spar with Braavosi water dancers training city guards. Davos oversaw launching of 5 new galleys. The Dawn Fleet, painted pale blue to warn pirates. King's Landing protected by dragons. The Iron Throne remained empty. By council decree, it would stand in Hall of Memories, museum not seat. On dais rose new construct, a round table of weirwood and black oak, its surface inlaid with silver thread-forming map of Westeros. Each kingdom's seat bore no crest. Instead, each counselor placed token of chosen craft. Tormund brought a carved bear, Gendry laid a hammer, Ambrose a quill, Missandei a small abacus, Arianne a viper of topaz, Davos a bundle of driftwood, Grey Worm a broken chain link. Jon brought a stone from the wall, white flecked. Daenerys placed a dragonglass arrowhead atop his stone. Together they formed Circle's center. One crisp evening, Bran rolled into hall as council convened. He rested hands on carved arms, eyes distant. A dream came, ravens flying east, carrying truth across sundering seas. We must send voices of peace, scribe our story upon silk and smoke. Let others know dawn after night is possible. Council agreed. Gendry forged cylinders, Tyrion penned treatises, maesters copied. Dragons carried capsules to ports of Karth, Volantis, even Ass High. Far across Summer Sea, Spice Kings scoffed until letters incited slaves to question chains. Knights of the Basilisk Isles considered alliances. Orphan scholars in Valisar wrote songs of Frostbreaker Queen. And behind peaks of Far Et, a child reading scrap of translated scroll pledged to master tongues of West to one day see dragons with her own eyes. Years spilled onward, layering memories atop scars like fresh snow over blackened stumps. When the first peach harvest came, bells rang for 3 days. People queued from dawn to dusk for single fruit, biting into flesh so sweet tears sprang. In the slums of Flea Bottom, a mother pressed juice to infants' lips. In the Red Keep, Jon sliced a peach and fed half to Daenerys, a drop slipping down her chin. He wiped it with thumb, earning a grin as bright as midday sun on harbor water. Time never ceased testing them. Drought struck Dorne. They opened granaries. Raiders from Stepstone's harried Tyroshi trade. Dawn Fleet repelled them. A fever raged in Summer Isles. Maesters sailed with healing charts. Each crisis reaffirmed Council's bond. 10 years after bells rang surrender, a rider thundered up the Rose Road carrying baby in arms, the first child born in King's Landing who had never seen blades in street. Council gathered to bless the babe. Tyrion, hair near Snow White now, toasted longevity. Arya, visiting from a voyage circumnavigating Essos, placed a tiny dagger hilt in child's palm. To remind you choice cuts deeper than steel, Gendry forged a peach blossom hairpin for the mother. Sansa wept quietly, remembering a time she thought cities could birth only sorrow. On that mild spring evening, Jon climbed the rooftop of the restored Great September where a small garden thrived. Daenerys joined, barefoot, gown brushing petunias. They lay side by side, fingers interlaced, looking at stars. "Do you ever fear winter will return?" she asked. "I respect it," he answered. "But fear can become simple caution once we know its shape. My ancestors chased dread until it devoured them. You taught me dread can be taught to stand still." He chuckled. "Dragons taught me calm is breathing through flames." Wind gusted, bringing faint roar, regal teaching hatchlings to glide. Their eggs had been discovered atop Dragonstone's caldera 2 summers ago. Now 3 young drakes, Smoketail, Dawnwing, and Cloud Dancer, testing thermals over Blackwater Bay. Each wore harness of silver chains forged by Gendry and lubricated by Dornish oils, ready to accept riders from every kingdom. For Council argued dragonflight should belong not solely to Valyrian blood, but to those chosen by Dragon as heartkin. Daenerys rolled onto elbow, studying Jon's profile. "I tire of titles," she murmured. "So drop them," he said, closing eyes. I'd rather trade Queen for Gardener of the Dawn. He laughed softly. Then I'll be your groundskeeper. They kissed beneath starlight, a gentle union absent urgency of war. Ghost dozed near door. Dragons soared overhead. Bells silent for once. Peace felt fragile yet firm, like frost on blossom before sunrise. Delicate but inevitable under right sky. One final memory. Many decades later, when those newborns of peace had grown gray, a stranger arrived at palace gates. Scholar from far-ass high, carrying fragment of pale crystal. She spoke of distant volcanoes rumbling, of whispers that shadows stir beneath shattered city walls half a world away. Council, older and slower, listened. Dragons, older and wiser, prickled wings. They prepared, not with fear, but with long-learned resilience. Ready to share Frostbreaker song, to raise tribunal steel in foreign lands, to swap steel for seeds when able, to wield flame only under oath of mercy. The scholar marveled at city rebuilt of quarried stone and fruit trees, asked what they called their age. An apprentice scribe leading her through Queen's orchard answered, "Dawn spring," he said, "named for the day we learned fire can warm without burning." The scholar wrote it in her scroll, uncertain how a city once legend for cruelty could speak so tenderly. Yet as she bit into peach offered by a boy with ghosts of blue scars on knuckles, sweetness convinced her. Legends grow like trees when fed by children unafraid of night. And so the world turned. Bells rang for weddings, for solstices, for harvest. They never again rang in terror, for every citizen remembered the reckoning that carved new dawn. Dragons nested peacefully above orchard blossoms. Wolves trotted unbothered down wharves. Nights were still cold, storms still strong, but hearts no longer trembled, because history sang of two souls, forged by ice and fire, who refused to let fear govern, and taught mankind to share watch together beneath one sky. A hush lay over the city at the edge of spring, that peculiar silence between the last breath of snowmelt and the first riot of greenery. From atop Aegon's hill one could hear the gulls all the way at the quays and the slow creak of the Dawn Fleet's capstans as they wound new hempen ropes under sun that, for the first time in seasons, felt warm enough to coax sweat from a brow. The sky wore an astonishing clarity, an unmarred bowl of pale sapphire, and in it the dragons practiced their leisurely spirals, threading thermals as though the air itself were a tapestry meant for them alone. Jon Snow watched from a half-finished balcony on the southern exposure of the reconstructed Tower of the Hand. Ghost lay at his feet, chin resting on paws, eyes following the dart and glide of Smoketail, the youngest of the new clutch drakes. Jon leaned on a cedar rail and let the city's heartbeat sink into his own. The ring of Gendry's hammers from Blackwater Forge, the shouts of masons aligning the final keystone over the new aqueduct, the smell of yeast riding from ovens where bakers tested the first of the summer bread grain. Peace, he had discovered, possessed its own music, and like any good song it changed key at unpredictable intervals, forever threatening dissonance yet landing often enough on sweet chords to keep hope alive. Behind him the door opened with a soft wooden sigh. Daenerys entered, barefoot, an oversized linen shirt dropping past her knees, curls still damp from a hurried bath. She carried 2 steaming cups of nettle tea and handed one over without speaking. Together they leaned upon the rail, shoulders and hips brushing with a quiet intimacy that had grown so natural neither felt the need to name it anymore. She tilted her chin north, where the spikes of the new September of 7 flames speared the sky. "They lift the 7th spire this afternoon," she said. "Archmaester Ebrose swears the design can withstand even dragonfire." Jon sipped. "Let's hope no one tests the theory." "Hope?" she echoed, and with her free hand rubbed the slight swell beneath her shirt. 5 moons along, the healers said, more certain by the day. She still wore no crown, no one did, but if there was any symbol of the realm's fragile future it grew there, in the quiet hum between heartbeats. The child's existence had shocked half the council and delighted the other half. Sansa, after a stunned silence, had predicted the babe's arrival would set every marriage market in Westeros aflame for 3 winters. Tyrion, predictably, wagered on the birth date within the hour, posting odds for twins. Arya had laughed and asked whether they preferred a dagger or bow for the child's first name day. The small folk simply started weaving stories. Tales where a dragon-riding prince or princess hatched from a peach blossom or rode the first direwolf south of the Neck in 700 years. Hope, it seemed, took whatever shape listeners needed. Daenerys tapped her mug. Arianne returns from Dorne next week. She'll want to inspect the weirs along the Mander before each channel takes floodwater. And she'll press for a Dornish seat on the rotating council, Jon said. As is her right. Yes, but she'll want it sooner than the charter allows. I'd rather have her on our side. Her desert reclamation is making the Grain Guild nervous. He chuckled. The Grain Guild is always nervous. They think every new seedling spells their doom. Give them a monopoly and they tremble that someone will dare share bread for free. Her smile flickered, but then she sobered. Speaking of tremble, Lord Grafton writes that smugglers from the Stepstones traffic more glass shards, claiming they ward plague. Varys's birds confirm. Jon's shoulders tensed. Fakes. Some. Others tinged with a cold that sets ice on oilcloth. Ghost growled low at the word cold. Jon set his mug on the rail. I'll leave by nightfall. Smoketail is small enough to drop me at Gulltown without rousing half the realm. She touched his wrist. The pulse there fluttered like a finch. Take Grey Worm, and Regal to Shadow. We need deterrence more than show. He nodded. They stood in silence broken only by distant hammer strikes and gull song. At length Daenerys said, Sometimes I wonder if shards of darkness will always drift back, no matter how many we scour. The tide rolls, Jon responded. We can't erase it, but we can map the currents, warn sailors, build breakwaters. She considered that, then pressed a kiss to his cheek. Come back to me. Always. The gulls flocked thick over Gulltown's harbor, wheeling above crates of oranges, cedar trunks, and spools of Dornish silk unloaded by a quartet of round-bellied galliots. Yet beneath the bustle lay tension. Sailors crossing themselves when a cold gust funneled between warehouses, guards in patched cloaks eyeing each barrel with suspicion. Rumors about ice charms had spread like mildew since Old Tom's death. Fishwives claimed a single sliver of black glass kept winter sickness at bay and whitened teeth besides. Jon found 2 such shards by midday, innocent sea glass painted with lamp oil to mimic sheen, but a third, buried in pickled eel brine, leached a chill that frosted brine to slush. They destroyed it on the spot, resonance whistle cracking at first, then torching fragments until nothing but glass beads remained. Grey Worm's presence cowed smugglers. The unsullied commandant coordinated pier sweeps with the city watch, confiscating 3 crates of counterfeit shards and enough Tyroshi dye to keep the charade profitable another season. Jon met dusk in the customs house with the harbor master, a stooped man named Beldegar whose ink-stained fingers shook whenever the wind moaned. Folk'll believe any charm now, Beldegar muttered as he tallied confiscated goods. One winter of fear carves grooves that never mend. They'll fill them with any salt and ash a charlatan sells. Jon leaned on the desk. Then we must fill them first. Send word to King's Landing. Orchard bark for cough, willow tea for fever, burned nettle for chill. Spread knowledge cheaper than glass shards. The harbor master considered. You think folk will trust remedies of leaf and twig over magic stone? They'll trust what heals. If a remedy's free, it outlasts any grifter. Jon signed the order. Outside, Smoketail chuffed impatiently on a rooftop, wings flicking snow dust. Jon mounted, Grey Worm climbed behind the saddle, and they rose into twilight orange. Regal's shadow kept pace a furlong above, emerald wings catching the last sunray like stained glass. They rode the wind home, leaving Gulltown to stories of a wolf lord who burned false charms and left real medicine in their stead. Winter eased its grip, though nights still nipped. At Queen's Orchard, saplings pushed first true leaves. Missandei walked the rows each dawn, cataloging growth rates in ledger columns. She planned to replicate the orchard atop the highest terraces of Dragonstone, turning barren pumice fields into citrus groves. Tyrion jested she would soon finance half the realm by taxing marmalade exports. She replied that marmalade was cheaper than war. Within the Red Keep walls, rebuilt but still bearing scars, Sansa oversaw a weaving hall where widows and maimed soldiers spun wool dyed with root pigments. Their loom beats echoed through corridors once reserved for plotting. She discovered the rhythm calmed her. She no longer startled awake each night to phantom clang of bells. Bran lived in a sunlit solar overlooking the Blackwater. He spent hours charting shepherd star patterns with a Myrish astrolabe. From time to time he fell silent mid-conversation, eyes turning pale, mind adrift on some wind only ravens know. One gray afternoon he startled Tyrion by announcing the precise date spring floods would breach Dorne's southern canal. When the flood came 12 days later, to the very hour, Tyrion asked how he knew. Bran only smiled. Water remembers too. The tribunal expanded. They added a Summer Islander cartographer, a Lyseni apothecary, and a former sand snake who had renounced vendetta after tending wildfire burns. Trials became lessons. Defendants learned weaving, masonry, scribery, debts paid through service, not coin. Crime did not vanish. No city's blood ran that pure. But shape shifted. Bandits turned escorts on Emberwatch patrols. Rivermen, once smugglers, now ferried orchard saplings. The city's heart pumped odd new mixtures. But while King's Landing thrummed with possibility, the far frontiers whispered. Beyond eastern seas, Dothraki outriders under Khal Jacko's humbled successor wandered Lazer's desert fringe and found corpses rimed with black ice. Eyes melted to glass. They burned them and sent ravens west. Fragments return, carried by sands. In the frozen north of Essos, hard-bitten mammoth herders discovered a cave of crystal pillars thrumming with cold song. Their shaman died holding a shard alight. Whispers grew. The heart splinters sought each other, magnet drawn to magnet. Daenerys convened council. Archmaester Ebrose laid out star charts. Gendry rolled a crackling rod of tempered dragonglass across the map. Bran stared through walls. They concluded. If shards were drawn as filings around lodestone, then a pole of opposite force might shepherd them, perhaps not destroy but imprison, contained where harm less likely. They recalled the great black chasm in the Valyrian Peninsula, a fault older than doom. Tyrion dubbed it the Pit of Echoes. Bran nodded. Stone there swallowed magic. The plan formed. Lure shards by resonance. Cast them into pit. Seal fissure with dragonfire and mined obsidian. Not all agreed. Davos muttered about awakening ancient demons. Arya returned from far ports with tales of shadowbinders who claimed the pit harbored things that even winter feared. Still, shards multiplying would doom small folk faster than demons unknown. Decision stood. An expedition to the Forbidden Peninsula. Jon insisted on leading. Daenerys refused without him. Grey Worm swore unsullied shield. Missandei argued leaving council headless. Tyrion quipped they should all simply board the same boat and cue a poet. In the end, they chose a compact party. Jon, Daenerys, Grey Worm, Missandei, Gendry, 2 translators versed in Valyrian ruins, and Bran led by Hodder's gentle cousin Molly. They boarded the Candlemark, a sleek black-hulled caravel propelled by triangular Myrinese sails. Rhaegal and Drogon shadowed overhead. Smoketail remained to guard hatchling clutch. Sansa watched from pier, cloak whipping. "Return!" she called after lines cast off. "Return," echoed Arya, perched on prow, though she too planned to sail east, not with them, but toward Braavos again, chasing rumor of a library beneath the shadow sea that held the names of every god slain and living. As Candlemark slipped beyond Breakstone Cape, waves slapped hull like muted applause. Gendry unpacked resonance rods, tuning them across deck. Missandei plotted latitudes. Grey Worm drilled sailors in spear-thrust patterns between coils. Bran sat by the stern rail, eyes glassy, head angled to wind. Jon took will nights, letting Daenerys sleep curled beneath wool, her pulse thrumming under his fingers as he rested hand upon the quiet bump. They reached Valyria's broken shores on 3rd week. Jagged obsidian crags jutting from pallid mist, faint roar of volcanic vents echoing. No crew dared anchor near rotted skyline of toppled towers, so dragons guided them to a black sand islet at mouth of the old smoking strait. Their Bran directed them to wait. He would warg the ravens to scout Pitt's location. On the islet stood a lone structure, a circular archway of fused glass, half devoured by slag. Gendry's rod sang near it. Shards resonated within stone itself. Jon's breath plumed. Daenerys reached out, laying palm on arch. Frost rimed edges, then retreated. Inside arch a tunnel burrowed into cliff, its floor smooth like glaze that once flowed liquid. They ventured, torches sparking emerald where sulfur vented. Bran wheeled ahead, guided by intangible pull. The tunnel ended in cavern vast as any cathedral, roof lost in gloom. Veins of obsidian and ghost quartz zigzagged walls. At center yawned a pit, perfectly round, edges polished mirror black. When Jon tossed in a pebble, no sound returned. Bran placed hand to rim. Here winter's chords go mute. Gendry arranged rods in circle, each vibrating counterfrequencies. Missandei charted angles, adjusting until resonance merged into single thrumming hum. Barely audible yet teeth felt its throb. Outside, dragons roared, stirring shards buried in sea miles away. Like conscious minnows they swam currents toward call. The first arrived at dusk. A fragment on the beach, glimmering, jittering toward cavern mouth as though wind propelled. Gendry guided it with rod song. It skittered along glass floor and plunged into pit wordlessly. Another followed, larger, leaving trail of rhyming frost that vanished at threshold. All-night shards came, some smaller than fingernail, some fist-sized, each swarming to pit like moth to darkness. But near dawn came one the size of a man's heart, faceted like diamond. It pulsed bright, moaning low. Bran stiffened, eyes rolling white. He whispered, "The first memory." The shard floated, not hopping but levitating eerie foot above floor. Frost spiraled from it, creeping up Gendry's boots, icing torch oil. Dragons roared outside, blasts shaking cavern. Jon stepped forward, long claw drawn. Grey worm flanked. Daenerys raised torch high. The shard halted mid-air, turning as if to regard them, sapphire glow rippling. Jon felt fear ancient as moonless nights. Then Bran spoke from depths not his own. "We are shards of moon's tear, pieces of long cold. Release us to sleep."
Jon met Daenerys.
She nodded. Together they guided it, Jon's sword tip, her torch flame, toward pit. It resisted, forcing cold wind outward like beating wings. Frost cut skin. He gritted, stepping, pushing, each inch a battle. At rim the shard paused, flickered. Daenerys whispered in Valyrian, "Rest." She blew a single breath of fire. Copper flame licked tip of torch to shard. Black glass shimmered, dimmed. It dropped, spiraling noise like distant whale song. Then silence. The pit glowed faint, pulses subsiding. Gendry collapsed rods. Bran exhaled, eyes returning. "Heart sleeps," he murmured. "May it dream no more." They ascended, dawn sunlight slicing mist. Dragons perched on cliffs, wings spattered with frost crystals. Missandei recorded observations. Jon looked to Daenerys. A tear tracked down her cheek, either from cold or relief. He wiped it, smiling. But the world never stops turning. Across sea, a Myrish sea lord witnessed dragons over Valyria and vowed to claim hatchlings for empire. In far north of Westeros, a cult formed around memory of Night King, preaching ice as purity. In Dorne, a drought threatened vines, sending merchant princes clamoring for bigger shares of river water. Peace, always a garden, demanded constant tending. They sailed home with hull eased by calm seas. On deck at night, Jon threaded stories for unborn child. Of gentle giants and kind dragons, of cities that sang rather than screamed. Daenerys listened, head on his lap, stars mirrored in eyes. When Candlemark crossed Breakstone again, fleets sounded horns. King's Landing spread like a mosaic washed fresh, orchards blooming, streets swept, banners shading markets. Smoketail, bigger now, dived to greet, trumpeting until Regal scolded. Jon inhaled smell of peach blossoms mingled with brine and new. The long night's embers burned yet, but their glow no longer threatened wildfire. Merely warmth to remind generations darkness could be kindled into light. Ekwe, Sansa, Arya, Tyrion, and crowds met them. Children tossed petals. Someone strummed lute. Bells rang in a carefree cadence. Jon dismounted. Daenerys beside him. Grey Worm saluted. Bran wheeled forward, a faint smile ghosting. Sansa clasped Jon's forearms. "We kept your seat warm." He laughed, hugging her. Arya punched his shoulder. "You missed the Great Pie scandal. Long story." Tyrion bowed low to Daenerys. "You've brought us the world's first globe-sized ice cube, I hear? Dropped it down a bottomless hole," she quipped. "Pity. Would have chilled my summer wine nicely." They entered city not as conquerors nor saviors but gardeners returning with wheat pulled. Day passed in feasts, small speeches, brief prayers. Night came with gentle rain. Jon and Daenerys retired to balcony overlooking orchard. Moonlight painted trees silver. She placed his hand on her belly, movement fluttered. He felt tears again, not of grief but wonder. She whispered, "Tell me more stories," and he did. Of a wolf born under Aurora who howled the dark away, of a girl forged of starlight who rode dragons without fear, of a child of dawn who would grow in orchards and name each tree her friend. He spoke until words blurred into murmur, until rain ceased and moon set, until dawn painted new stripes of gold across the world they had fought to mend. Years ahead held storms, of politics, of hunger, of hearts clashing like swords, but beneath them ran a current undeniable. Shards of ice can be melted, shards of fire tempered, and between them flows a river where tomorrow plants its seeds. In that river they would stand watch, together beneath one sky, guardians not of thrones but of the simple right to wake without terror, a right measured not in crowns or coins, but in blossoms on a spring morning and the quiet laughter of children unafraid of snow. Snowmelt mist clung to the lower alleys like a half-remembered dream as first light slid across cracked slate and burnished every copper gutter in the capital. The hush that always preceded morning market felt especially fragile, as though the city itself held its breath while deciding what new tale it wished to tell. In the hush, a single raven coasted above Aegon's hill, feathers rimed with frost, then banked eastward toward the bay. Its small silhouette lost almost instantly against the huge dark wings of Regal circling far higher. Jon Snow strode through a colonnade of newly quarried sandstone, boots whispering over mosaic tiles too fresh for grime. His cloak was unfastened despite the cold, fur brushing the sword belt that marked him less a king than a warden of breathing folk. Grey Worm walked at his shoulder, and between them, on a litter borne by two unsullied, Bran Stark sat upright, eyes more lucid than anyone had seen in months. Bran's hand rested atop a rough pine box no longer than a short sword. Twin seals of dragonglass marked its hinges. They reached the stairs that spiraled down beneath the old sept's crypt foundations, those same crypts where green fire had run wild in another lifetime. Today the crypts scoured, drained, and braced served one purpose alone: vault for any remaining fragments of dead magic. Torchlight flickered along the new iron door. Beyond, maesters waited with resin, ash, and sand. Bran raised a palm, halting the procession. Jon leaned closer. "Below this skin of stone," Bran murmured, "the melody is quiet, but not gone. We lock these last notes here today." His breath ghosted. "Later generations must guard the key." Jon nodded. "And the story. Stories are keys that turn by themselves." Bran almost smiled. Then, slower, "You will sing it when needed." Grey Worm's expression did not soften, yet he set one hand gently on the box before stepping back. The Unsullied lifted Bran and his burden across the threshold. When the iron door clanged shut, the cavernous boom rolled up the stairwell like distant thunder. Jon exhaled long. Tension eased from his shoulders as though he'd set down a shield after a year's watch. Outside, the courtyard thrummed. Hammer on anvil, cartwheels over flagstone. Hawkers calling the first peaches of the season. He turned north toward the wide marble steps that led to the council rotunda, staff now jokingly called the Round Keep. A circle of colored glass crowned its dome, and in that glass dawn burst into swirling ribbons of gold and crimson. Regal tipped one wing as he passed overhead, sunlight flashing off green scales. A moment later Drogon answered from the western sky, a low rumble like rock moving undersea. The city no longer flinched when dragons announced their presence. Children pointed and some laughed. Inside the rotunda, the great oak table shone under new polish. Around it sites of daily governance took shape. No thrones, only high-backed chairs, each inscribed with the craft sigil of its steward. Missandei sat at the abacus chair, quill already flickering across a vellum roll of barge manifests. Arian Martell leaned back in the chair marked with the subtle curve of an irrigation crook, bare feet propped on a footstool carved like a coiled viper. Gendry arrived from the forge, blacksmith apron still hot from sparks. He dropped a new coin die onto the table, proof of final mint designs. Tyrion skulked in last, bleary-eyed, clutching a ledger that spilled half a dozen fluttering pages as he climbed onto his stool. Dogs bark, roosters crow, and ledgers multiply, he grumbled. Someone remind me why a man of letters couldn't have chosen a simpler age to live in. Arian flashed a grin. Because simpler ages never remember their scribes. Missandei looked up. Shall we begin? Jon, now seated beneath the wolf and ice sigil, nodded. But before Missandei could read the day's first petition, the rotunda doors swung wide and Davos entered at a brisk march, cloak still whipped by river wind. The Onion Knight bowed once. Ships on the horizon, he announced. Sails red on black Myrish pattern. Scouts count 6, maybe 7. Tyrion raised an eyebrow. Expected? I was promised no war before breakfast. Jon stood. Diplomats only? No, Davos said. Armed. Ballistae on forecastles. The council's hum sharpened. Arian tapped nails on Viper armrest. Mir paid sell sails once. Could pay again. Gendry leaned forward. Our fleet's downriver escorting grain. Only 2 light galleys at harbor now. Missandei rolled up her parchment. I will dispatch ravens to Dawn Fleet. They can make mouth of Blackwater by dusk. Jon's gaze shifted to Tyrion, whose brow furrowed but lips twitched ruefully. I'll ready ground defenses, Tyrion sighed. I thought we'd have another year before some distant prince tested the orchard. Jon turned to Grey Worm. The commander's hand was already on the pommel of his short sword. Unsullied companies are drilling at Tower of Maegor, he said. 200 can reach seawall in half-hour. Do it, Jon said. Lock the river chain, and warn the dragons. A tremor rolled through the chamber, a memory more than a noise, as if the stones recalled how quickly peace could hinge on wings. Within an hour, ramparts thronged with archers, pikemen, and wide-eyed fisherfolk pressed into duty. The chain, 5 lengths forged from repurposed scorpion arms, groaned up from its capstan and stretched across the Blackwater mouth like a dark, stitched scar. Small skiffs scuttled behind it, clearing lanes. On the bluff above the harbor, 3 new trebuchets, creations of the Builders' Guild, hunched, baskets stuffed with slings of chalk, dust meant to blind rather than kill. Jon paced the wall, cloak snapping, Ghost pacing at his heels. In the bay's haze, sails resolved, black field, a crimson spiral of unknown design. Bowcasters protruded like teeth. Lantern glass along gunnels flashed unnatural green. He glimpsed what looked disturbingly like wildfire troughs set along the rails. A horn sounded from the parapet as Regal's shadow swooped in, landing with ground-shaking weight on an outcrop of basalt. Drogon followed, wings knocking up spirals of loose snow. Daenerys dismounted in a single fluid drop, her riding leathers dark against wind-tossed ash-gray hair. She crossed the parapet to stand beside Jon. They shared a brief look, questions and answers compressed into a flicker. Grey Worm signaled from tower top, for Myrish galleys and 2 Dromons holding out of catapult range. One flagged parley. Jon raised a spyglass. Across the water a small skiff launched, white pennon fluttering. On deck, 3 figures. One tall in ornate lamellar. One slender, perhaps a priest. One scribbling on a scroll even as wind whipped parchments. Jon looked to Daenerys. We meet them. In open harbor, not on busy docks. She nodded. Moments later, they mounted Regal. Grey Worm boarded the barge that served as council tender. Gendry joined, lugging a resonance rod disguised as a staff. Arianne remained on wall, directing archers to track trebuchet baskets. The tender pushed off, rowed by 4 shield islanders. Regal skimmed low overhead, ripple of green scale reflecting in black water. The Myrish skiff slowed as they approached. Wind carried an underscent. Not tar, not salt, something acridly sweet, like flowers rotting under moon. Jon's hackles rose. Ghost on wall above loosed a low howl. The tall envoy hailed in sing-song Valyrian. Lord of Winter, Queen of Flame, we travel from the triarchy of Miros and Lys. His accent bent vowels like melting glass. We bring a gift of alliance and a warning. Daenerys spoke first. Your ballistae speak louder than your banner. The envoy bowed stiffly. Precaution only. Our seas have grown unreliable. The scribe unfurled scroll, ink fresh. We track ashglass, yes? We follow currents swirl from doom straits. Our sailors net more every moon. Your dragons burn shards, but others still drift. Jon's expression hardened. You sailed armed to sell shards back to us? No, the envoy said smoothly. We wish guidance. The triarchy offers to exchange knowledge. Currents maps, salvage rights. In return, he gestured across water. We request assistance cleansing our gulf. Gendry shifted weight. Wildfire on your rails suggests cleansing might look like conquest. The envoy's smile thinned. Some captains fear what crawls in dark. They light fire preemptively. Grey Worm stepped forward. Lay down weapons. Dock without flames. Then we talk. Priest figure stepped ahead. Hood falling back to reveal a woman with eyes milk blue and hair bleached bone white. Jon stilled. Something about her aura echoed Hardhome's memory. She bowed, voice a cool hush. The shards hunger for heat. Burn them and they seek living fire elsewhere. Quench them with silence, and they sleep. She produced a small orb, yet not quite glass. It shimmered opalescent. We offer a vessel. Slide shard within, it becomes stone again. Dreamless. No dragonfire needed. Gendry frowned. What alchemy is that? Songless glass, she said. Forged where moonlight pierces water deeper than night. Few can craft. Jon's gaze locked on Daenerys. We should test. She nodded. Bring it. Grey Worm gestured. A rower ferried orb across gap. Gendry accepted. Wade. Frost formed under his fingers. Gentle, not biting. He tapped it with rod. Resonance dead. He tapped again, dull, inert. Jon felt tension shift. Potential solution or new trap. Behind envoy, the galleys realigned. Prows turning slightly. Tyrion's eyes narrowed from wall vantage. He barked to Arianne. Trebuchets creaked. Jon spoke low. We test your vessel on one of our shards. If it works, we parley. If not, you sail home minus your weapons. The envoy bowed. Agreed. But time's scarce. Currents shift. If we linger, shards follow, and we risk plague in your bay. Jon's pulse ticked. Bran had said pit now magnet. Shards shouldn't drift back west, unless new ones spawned further east. He raised hand. Daybreak. We test then. He turned. The envoy called after. Take heed. South of Valyria, at the smoking sea's edge, pillars of glass sprout anew. As vines, they break waves. Some whisper the doom itself grows back, piece by piece. The envoy's breath misted. Even pits have bottoms. Daenerys's eyes flashed. We'll see to the roots when we must. The skiff retreated. Regal circled overhead. As Jon's tender returned, he studied orb in Gendry's gauntlets. Small, silent, light pulsing within faintly like breath in a sleeping babe. That night, beneath guards' torches in an inner courtyard, they tested. A single remaining shard, long stored in ash box, dropped into orb. Frost crawled across obsidian surface, then receded. Resonance rod struck, dull still. They left orb on frost-lined pedestal. At dawn it remained inert, warmth of sun failing to wake any blue flame. Maesters probed. Measured. Safe. Tyrion drained a cup. Either an answer to prayer or a blade hidden in bread. Jon addressed council. We can't decline alliance, but we require oversight. Send emissaries with dragons to their gulf. Teach them Frostbreaker methods. Accept orbs only under treaty that forbids wildfire at sea. Daenerys agreed. I will ride Drogon east. Jon keeps watch here. Bran's ravens will guide. Sansa frowned. Another voyage? The babe nears term. Daenerys laid a hand on her belly. I will carry fire carefully. Jon's face tightened. I'll go with you. She shook head. 2 riders risk dragons both. Stay. Guard the orchard. Guard council. Reluctant, he acquiesced. Grey Worm volunteered escort. Missandei insisted on record. Tyrion muttered about needing at least one hand alive. Aerion winked and promised Dornish desert fruit for the journey. Preparations quick. By noon next day, Drogon and Rhaegal launched east bearing Daenerys, Grey Worm, Missandei, and Gendry. The sky swallowed them. Their shadows raced across orchard rows where petals now rained in soft breeze. Jon stood amid blossoms falling like silent snow. Ghost sat beside. He felt tug. A knot of fear and pride woven together. He knelt, scooped petal handful, let them flutter away. Return, he whispered to wind. 3 weeks later ravens arrived. Daenerys' fleet reached Myrish Gulf. Orbs effective. Shards ceiling. But at Smoking Sea rim they spied glass pillars tall as masts, humming. Dragons circled. Flame licked pillars. Shockwave rippled but glass held, glowing internal red. Expedition established camp on volcanic islet to study. Jon paced war room. Bran's eyes clouded. Those pillars not born of cold, Bran whispered. They are roots of doom, finding breath again. Tyrion sighed. History repeats because storytellers forget lines. Sansa laid hand on Jon's arm. Bring her home. Jon set jaw. Prepare second embassy. But we ride with peace first, not scourge. We bring the council. He turned to Grey Worm's second, now acting commander. Drill new citadel guard. Be ready for absence. To Aerion, secure drought channels. To Tyrion, draft charters binding harvests. Orchard children must not fear snow again. Arya emerged from shadow, back from Bravos earlier than schedule. I'll scout pillars. Quietly. Jon met her gaze. No death unless needed. She smirked. Needed finds me rarely these days. Bran spoke again, voice distant. The pit muted heart of ice. But root of fire may need deeper soil. Far beneath Smoking Sea lies hollow. If dragons seed flame there, doom ends. Jon absorbed. And if doom escapes upward? Bran's lips thinned. Then bells ring once more. But city now knows how to act, not panic. Within fortnight, Jon, Arya, Tyrion, and a cadre sailed east aboard Hope's Ember, Smoketail and Dawnwing overhead. Jon left Ghost with orchard children, protector in his stead. Sansa managed council, her calm voice lending steadiness to reports. Each dusk she walked orchard rows, as if seeking counsel from peach trees. Across summer sea storms lashed, yet dragons parted clouds. They reached volcanic chain where Daenerys encamped. Orange glow lit sky by night. Pillars loomed jagged, some leaning outward like teeth. Shards drifted to them, singing low notes. Orbs captured each without conflict. Daenerys met Jon on black sand shore, belly heavy but stride sure. They embraced, speaking few words. Together they hiked to Caldera Rim, where molten lake churned, vomiting sparks that floated skyward like false stars. Bran's ravens circled. Arya watched from rocky perch. Tyrion calculated structural collapse angles should pillars fall. Daenerys spread maps. We channel lava through crevasse, Bran marked. Dragons melt pillar bases. They sink. Magma entombs root. Grey Worm organized tasks. That night dragons roared, unleashing controlled torrents. Pillars cracked, groaned, toppled into fiery lake. Ash plumes towered. At dawn only stumps remained, glowing like coals. But one pillar, largest, resisted flame. Cracks appeared yet base fused anew. Gendry struck it with rod. Resonance rang across bay, summoning shards hiding in ocean. A maelstrom of glass fragments rose, swirling. Pillar drank them, absorbing, thickening. Bran cried out, "It feeds!" Daenerys mounted Drogon, Jon on Regal, Arya rode behind Dawn Wing, bonded during voyage. They climbed sky. Bran intoned through ravens. Sing Frostbreaker reversed, heat song. Gendry retuned rods to new frequency, deep chord. Dragons exhaled flame while rods thrummed. Pillar vibrated, inner light pulsing crimson to white. It softened, sagged, then burst, shards flying like meteors. Lava swallowed debris, hissing. Shockwave flung dragons off balance. Dawn Wing tumbled but righted.
Jeunesse y rend.
Smoke cleared. Pit of fire calmed. Shard swarm gone. Daenerys circled, seeking any glow. None. She landed, breathing ragged. She felt sudden pain, a contraction. Missandei rushed. Water broke. Labor had begun. On that volcanic shore, within a tent hastily erected from dragonhide sails, Daenerys labored through night while ash snowed outside. Jon held her hand, Tyrion boiled cloth, Arya guarded flap, blade dancing reflection of lava glare. Grey Worm knelt outside praying in low Valyrian, unsullied heart pounding. At first light, a child's cry pierced roar of distant fumaroles, strong, demanding. A girl, skin pale as ash, tuft of dark hair, eyes startling violet. Missandei wrapped babe in silk-dyed peach pink. Jon wept silent. Daenerys laughed and wept together, whispering, "Nyra, Dawnflower." Dragons bellowed in unison, their voices echoing across scarred sea like prophecy fulfilled. Weeks later, the fleet returned to King's Landing. Bells rang, not in terror but jubilation. Small folk lined wharves, waving sprigs of blossoms. Sansa welcomed them, tears sparkling. Nyra blinked at throng. Fist clutched around petal Jon had given her mid-voyage. Ghost stood sentinel, sniffing baby then licking her cheek to squeals. Council met that evening. Jon presented treaty scrolls signed by Triarchy. Shards to be surrendered, wildfire banned beyond 50 leagues, trade opened. Arianne delivered water charts showing Dorne vines flourishing. Tyrion unveiled new coin minted with peach blossom flanked by wolf and dragon. Inscription, "From fire, fruit." Bran spoke last. "Root of doom sleeps again, but memory remains. Teach each generation songs that break frost and melt stone. Guard stories as fiercely as walls." Years rolled forward. Peach orchards spread along King's Road. Frostbreaker choirs rehearsed annually. Tribunal grew into living university of crafts. Children learned to read by lilt of poem. In night so long the moon wept ice, but dawn spring came on dragon's flight. From shard to seed the world was spun. Beneath one sky all hearts as one. When Nyra turned 5, she climbed Smoketail's saddle. First test flight across orchards. Blossoms rained. City cheered. And high on Red Keep balcony, Jon and Daenerys watched, fingers intertwined, proud smiles reflecting sunset afterglow. A promise kept, a song unstopped, a world still perilous yet fiercely alive. Tended by gardeners who once were warriors, always ready to prune fear, to water hope, and to let new stories rise like fruit on trees that had once grown from fields of ash. The hush that wrapped King's Landing after the dragonborn birth of Nyra Targaryen lasted scarcely a fortnight before the cadence of work reasserted itself, unrolling like a carpet of hammer strikes and orchard laughter. Farmers thronged the city gates to barter early apricots. Scribes queued at the round keep to petition for fresh vellum, and the dawn fleet tugged sloops from dry dock, hulls still tacky with bright paint. Life, Jon had come to realize, refused to pause for marvel or crisis. Both were folded quickly into routine, the city's pulse forever pushing forward. A low morning fog hugged the quays when Arya Stark slipped downriver, a satchel slung over one shoulder, needle sheathed against her spine. Dawn Wing cut lazy circles overhead, a glossy crescent still small enough that harbor folk called her the moon's fin. Arya's breath plumed as she urged the narrow skimmer through wake left by lumber haulers. Officially she traveled to Bravos again, chasing scraps about ancient glass forgers. In truth, she could no longer ignore the itch of open sea. She left behind a single note on Sansa's desk. Don't worry. Back before plum season. Keep the orchard purring. She took with her 3 frostbreaker rods, 2 sandviper knives, and a promise to Gendry to return with Bravosi alloys no smith had seen since Nymeria sailed from Royn. On the wall above, Jon watched her mast vanish into fog. A pang half pride, half loneliness, shivered through him. Ghost whined softly. Jon scratched the direwolf's ears. Our sister hunts, he murmured. We trust her. Ghost licked his hand, as if to say trusting never made waiting easier. By midday the round keep hummed with yet another assembly. Delegates from the free companies of Lys sought license to operate escort caravans along the Rose Road. Lords of the Vale demanded adjudication over quarry rights. And 2 northern clans argued about ownership of a single rune-etched anvil discovered in a thawed barrow. Jon presided from the plain oak highback, Nyra cradled in a sling across his chest. Daenerys still recovering and content to let the council taste paternal chaos. Every time Nyra gurgled, the envoy from Lys flinched. Every time she yawned, half the chamber smiled. Tyrion proclaimed it the most efficient check on mendacity he had ever witnessed. When the Vale petition threatened to devolve into a shouting match, Nyra let out a piercing wail. Jon, grinning sleep-deprived, declared session adjourned for feeding. No one complained. In private chamber Jon soothed Nyra with direwolf soft blanket, humming the simple northern lullaby old Nen once crooned. Outside, bells rang midday. He glanced through tall window, orchard trees blotched pink and white, petals drifting like lazy snow. Somewhere out there, Daenerys was pacing the veranda, aching to climb Drogon's neck again, healer's warnings notwithstanding. She had always been made for flight. Stillness felt like a kind of injury. Nyra dozed. Jon laid her gently into a wicker crib and stepped back to listen to the silence. It lasted 4 heartbeats before a rap sounded. Missandei. Forgive, she said softly. But urgent raven from Kalaro Sprawl. She passed scroll. Jon scanned. Pillars groan again on eastern rim. Lava calms. Then glass pushes through anew. We hold but supplies scarce. Await guidance. Jon cursed under breath. The glass root they shattered had not been alone. The planets wound kept weeping. He penned quick reply. Hold perimeter. Burn no shards without orb. Reinforcements sail next moon. Keep night songs. He sealed it with wax. Pressed direwolf dragon sigil. Missandei's eyes betrayed concern. Tell Daenerys? She asked. Not yet, Jon said. She'll fly today if she knows. He glanced to crib. Sun must set softer before mother's wings beat again. Daenerys, of course, sensed tremor anyway. That dusk she confronted Jon in orchard, eyes keen. A raven comes, she said. Yet your jaw hides words. He handed scroll. She read, shoulders stiffening. The root lives, she murmured. Or something deeper. We sail, but not until you're strong, Jon insisted. I am strong, she snapped. Then her expression softened. Forgive. Birth left me restless. A sword in scabbard too long. Jon touched her cheek. I know, but the realm weighs on us. We can't chase every ember ourselves. Night birds circled above. Petals swirled. She blew out breath. Then we send another pair of riders. Grey Worm and... Who will carry the second dragon? Jon hesitated. Smoketail was bonded to no adult rider. Dawnwing obeyed Arya alone. That left only 2 regal Drogon. One must stay to safeguard capital. Gendry? He had grown comfortable with rods, but dragon riding? He would need weeks. Tyrion? The idea summoned visions of disaster. I'll ride, Jon said. She shook head. Warden must keep city. Nyra needs father. Jon clenched fist. Choices seemed illusions. Whichever path they took left flanks exposed. And then a voice from steps. Let me, Sansa said. They turned, startled. The Lady of the North descended veranda, cloak powdered with peach petal. "I have no fire in veins," she continued. "But guidance dragons heed word as much as blood. Now they've learned peace." Daenerys frowned. "Without bond." "Bonds form," Sansa cut gently. "I spent months walking orchard with Regal perched overhead." She smiled faintly. "He likes the scent of plum blossoms." She faced Daenerys. "Teach me. Give me Gendry's rods. I'll steer." "And I," added another voice, Arianne, stepping from behind Trunk, "will take Lys fire ships to Kalaro. Dorne owes the desert kin." Jon stared. "This council multiplies heroes faster than threats." "Perhaps threats feel outnumbered," Arianne quipped. They deliberated long into night. Bran, when consulted, offered cryptic nod. North Wind must one day trust South Flame. He saw perhaps futures of Sansa riding dragon. None else did. Ultimately plan forged. Sansa and Regal to depart with Frostbreaker Guard and Arianne's desert skiffs. Jon to stay. Daenerys to oversee capital reconstruction, train Smoketail's new rider, one of the freefolk spearwives chosen by lot. Peace required many hands. "When Sansa Key," said Jon's brow next dawn, she whispered, "You guarded our family always. Now let us guard you." She wore leather trimmed in Mal-Lister blue, borrowed from storerooms, but she pinned to breast a single iron wolf. Regal accepted her cautiously. He ducked when she approached, sniffed hair. She spoke calm tones, offered slice of smoked mackerel. With a rumble, he allowed harness strapped. Daenerys repeated mantra of balance, breath, thigh cues. Sansa listened, eyes flint-focused. When she mounted, Orchard gasped. Northern Lady on dragonback, copper sun cresting behind head, cloak streaming. Regal beat wings, scattering leaves in green hurricane, then soared. Nyra gurgled at wonder. Jon held child and watched until dragon dwindled to jade moat. Ghost howled farewell. Days flicked by like pages. Jon met tribunal, signed export tithes, inspected river sluice gates. Daenerys resumed dragon rider drills at dawn, though healers scolded. She flew low arcs along coast, burning driftwood to ash for charcoal harvesters. Tyrion drafted a charter declaring Orchard produced tax-free for first 5 seasons. Missandei balanced accounts with minted Peachwolf coins. One evening under lantern glow, Jon and Daenerys picnicked near Godswood Pond. Fresh bread, goat cheese, apricot jam. Nyra slept in basket. Ghost patrolled perimeter. They spoke of trivialities, Gendry's new alloy, Bran's fascination with comets, Arya's letter from Storm's End describing Bravosi glass with golden swirl. Suddenly a raven swooped, claw scraping Jon's shoulder before dropping scroll. Wax seal cracked by impact. He opened. Arianne's sigil, but ink shaky. Ships aflame. Shards swirl above sea. Regal injured but fights sky. Sansa leads rod song. Need dragon song second voice. Hurry. Coordinates followed. Daenerys rose, eyes blazing. "We go. Tonight." Jon's gut clenched. "Nyra. Missandei guards." He hesitated, mind warring. Then, "We both ride. Smoketail strong enough for me now." He summoned stable master. Soon, night sky lit by dual forms. Drogon, vast shadow streaked red. Smoketail, smaller but swift, scales midnight toe-tipped in silver. Jon strapped in behind rough horns, adrenaline lancing worry. Drogon climbed first. Smoketail followed, instinct guiding wings. They banked east, over river mouth across dark waves. Jon's heartbeat matched wind rush. Beneath, water glimmered faint emerald, some wildfire slick. Time folded into rippling night. Hours later pillars of smoke appeared. Horizon lit hellish green. Burning Dramens bobbed, crackling's shards swirling cyclone above. On high updraft, Regal hovered, one wing trailing blood. Sansa clung to saddle, flanked by Frostbreaker guards singing high-pitch rod song. Shards resisted. Swirl tightened. Drogon roared thunder. His presence disrupted spiral. Shards drifted. Daenerys dived, unleashed breath not flame but a targeted blast that split vortex, giving Regal safe corridor. Sansa turned Regal to join Drogon, breath both at resonance counterpoint. Smoketail added third note higher, piercing. The shards tremored, flared blue, then collapsed inward, drawn to single orb strapped to Arian's flagship now listing but afloat. Orb glowed, swallowed shards like rain into spring well. When last fragment disappeared, orb sealed, cold steam hissed. Sea calmed. Wildfire veins sputtered out. On deck Arian cheered, hair singed. Jon landed Smoketail, boots skidding on tarred planks. He clasped Sansa, her face smeared with soot but alive. Grey Worm's second saluted. Losses were minimal. Regal's wing torn but healing. Daenerys touched down, eyes luminous. She lifted orb with tongs, placed in iron chest. Back to pit, she vowed. All agreed. Before dawn they set sail collectively. The battered Lys Drummond, Arian's skiff, and Drogon overhead guiding. Jon watched horizon lighten, Sansa asleep against crate, hands still gripping broken rod. He whispered thanks to nameless gods and resolved to commission braziers carved with northern runes at Dragon's Eyrie, symbols of ground and sky united. Upon return, festival erupted spontaneously. Songs of three-note dragon choir, of Lady of Winterflame, of Viper Fleet. Nyra toddled between orchard rows clutching smallest peach, giggling as petals stuck to cheeks. Bran planted frostbloom seeds along canal banks, claiming they would glow on night's shards once sang. Jon and Daenerys stood in balcony arch at twilight, arms entwined. City shimmered below, lanterns dotting streets like constellations. They were bone-tired but hearts full. He traced line of her collarbone. One day, he murmured, adventure will cease passing threshold. She chuckled, voice rough. And day after, orchard pigs will fly. They laughed until tears stung. In distance, Regal soared beside Smoketail, wing heeled, carrying Sansa and Arya, freshly returned. On celebratory arc Drogon remained perched above keep, sentinel silhouette. Daenerys turned to Jon. Whatever roots rise, we answer. But orchard gives seed to many. Shards no longer only our burden. He nodded. Nor our song alone to sing. We taught world tune. Now choir grows. She laid head on his chest. Nyra's soft cry echoed from nursery. Jon kissed Daenerys's hair. Time for stories. New ones, she said. They left balcony, hand in hand, descending torchlit corridor. Outside, orchard wind rustled leaves, petals lifting like echoes of battles past. Now merely fragrant memories drifting into night as bells chimed 8th hour. A lullaby to a city committed to waking tomorrow, and tomorrow, with open gates, shared tables, and watchful eyes turned always to horizon where moonlight kissed quiet seas.